ready to begin.
Get the ordinance for find some paper.
Okay, I'd like to call this council meeting to order. And welcome those who are here. So I know that we've got a number of people that have some things to say, and we appreciate the chance to engage you in a discussion. Hopefully be meaningful and civil. Okay, so why don't we jump right into item 1, which further to what I just mentioned, a discussion with residents concerning the adoption of ordinance 2022-14.
Actually,
We have a public hearing first.
Oh, excuse me, okay, public hearing, thank you. All right, and Jennifer, I see you have submitted a request to speak. So if it relates to 2022-14, then I think that we could probably roll it all together, but if it's something that is related to something else, you're welcome to have the floor now.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
anybody else for anything unrelated to 2022-14?
Master plan.
Oh, yeah, the public hearing is about the master development agreement, so that's, we gotta
Oh,
ask
that's
them
right.
if they have any questions about that.
Yeah, well, I think that falls under anything not related to 2022-14. Ben?
Nothing specific, just thanks to Dave and Wayne for all the hard work and time they put into helping us get to this point. And we're just anxious to see how tonight goes and take the next step, so thank you. Thanks to both of them.
Yeah,
For all their help.
I thank you for saying so, and I agree. Yeah, interestingly, I think that probably most of the discussion is not going to relate to the Summit Creek Development Agreement, at least it seems like it might be elsewhere. Okay, so if there is no comment, we will then move on to item 1 and discuss the ordinance defining yard front, yard side, and yard rear. And Dalton, I know that you and I spoke about this, so I will turn the time to you, and then we can just proceed through and give everybody the opportunity to be heard. So thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I can just speak from right here?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, great.
Unless Jody needs you to speak somewhere closer to, okay,
Well, make it work. If someone can't hear them, they'll let you know.
okay.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mayor, and I'd like to thank the City Council for allowing me a few minutes to speak. I am here to register my concern in opposition to ordinance 2022-14. Like many of you, before I purchased property here, I drove through the place and was just so impressed with its beauty. And I know I'm not alone. I felt it was an unusual place. This was over 30 years ago, if not unique. I love the way the houses were set among the trees. I love the privacy it afforded. And I realized this was not by chance, and came to realize later that it was actually set out in a city charter, as it were. I was drawn by the aesthetics, but I came to realize, like all of us, that Woodland Hills is not without its risk. It sits on a fault line, probably at risk for earthquakes. All of us have, most of us here have lived through the risk of fire, and I was, the firemen came and laid those huge hose in our backyard, telling me that this would be the last line of defense. They thought they could defend up to this point. And we have, all of us have some experience with floods and mudslides, but the original vision sought not only to create this unique environment and the aesthetics, but also to mitigate those risks. And altered slopes, loosely compacted, fill dirt, as compared to natural soil and grades, can contribute to the problem. I have a paragraph from a geotechnical engineer who writes, in my professional opinion, As a geotechnical engineer with more than 35 years of experience, I strongly recommend the city not change its ordinance regarding side yard setbacks, which it could otherwise allow backfilled soils and retaining walls within the narrow side yards, and that the city maintain its historic ordinance to not allow disruption of native grades and soils within the side yard setbacks. I believe this is in the best interest and safety of the community. As I've looked at this, some questions have come to mind. I don't expect this to be answered tonight, but one was, why now? Why change an ordinance that has served this community for over 35 years? I appreciate the mayor and talking to him and others who were generous with their time. And I also want to say how grateful I am for all of your service in making this such a wonderful community to live in. But I asked, are builders or developers pushing for this? And the answer I've always received is no. I've been given other reasons like driveways and gardens and swing sets, oh my. And none of that really makes any sense to me. That's because every house needs a driveway, and I don't think there's ever been a case where a driveway has not been allowed because of open space consideration. And there are ordinances that specifically relate to open space, which all of you know much better than I do. I also wanted to say that I've been invited over to Mike and Patty Reed's garden, which is the most amazing place I've ever seen. And it, for the most part, can't be seen from the street. I drove by it last night and you can glimpse it, but it's fenced, and the perimeter of their yard is completely surrounded by trees. I don't think anybody is offended or bothered by this amazing garden that makes Woodland Hills a better place. And I personally have benefited from its bounty because the Reeds share that with everybody, because that's the kind of people they are. We have a large swing set in our backyard. Cameron built it 10 years ago. You can't see that from the street, and I don't think anybody is offended by it. I've also heard that, again, in talking with members of the city council who once again were very generous with their time, and I feel there was a good feeling with our discussions. Some have suggested it's related to Four Seasons and maybe fences. And I think we can all acknowledge that Woodland Hills is not homogeneous in its topography. Should some deserve special treatment because of that? Well, perhaps. But that can be easily addressed with variances. We don't have to pass a law that changes the very character of Woodland Hills. Some have said that the term open space is confusing, or we haven't enforced it in the past, and I feel those statements are neither sufficient nor accurate. I think that open space was understood by the city fathers, if you will. I recently read through the city general plan, which offers a vision, and under community view, under identity, it says, quote, homes or space with plenty of trees between them. It goes on to say privacy is unequal, and for those looking for a quiet escape, this is the place. Well, I still feel that way. I think it's an unusual, a very unusual place. And the definition under Title 10, under zoning for open space was, quote, use of land which leaves soil generally undisturbed and upon which natural vegetation, native or not, native to this area, occupies the major visible aspect of the land. Last night, Sharon and I drove through Woodland Hills because I wanted to make sure that this isn't my nostalgia or, you know, my memory or what I thought was the case. But I feel that, you know, Woodland Hills is unusual, and that I feel that the citizens of Woodland Hills have tried their best to build homes with respect and respecting the natural environment around it. As I drove through, most everybody has trees around their lots. It is this place that, you know, we fell in love with. And so, for whatever reason, this has worked for us. This idea of open space has worked. And you're correct, when I've heard people say that open space often refers to public spaces, that is correct. And I've been researching this and reading it in places from the east coast of Salt Lake County, and sometimes that is the case. Open space refers to parks and other things. However, it also frequently it refers to the private lands. In fact, Salt Lake County, it defines open space, among other things, as passive, low impact, or areas where there's little or no land disturbance, which is very similar to the definition that was originally used by the founders of Woodland Hills to describe the land around private homes. In conclusion, thank you for giving me this time. If you feel a need to clarify the definition, why not make it less restrictive? Why not make it more restrictive? If that's your interest, if it really is that open space has too many meanings, I don't feel that's the case, but if you feel that, then please at least make it equal to what it has been in the past, particularly if changing that definition will do violence to the very nature and character of our home that is beloved to so many of us. I've had a very cordial and I thought productive conversation with our hardworking mayor. He said he favors a legislative solution to this issue rather than a referendum, and I heartily concur with that, and I would like to see that too. But Sharon and I, we have a second home in St. George. I know what lots surrounded by cinder block fences look like. I have no problem with that. They're fine people down there. It's not Woodland Hills. And even driving through Elk Ridge, it's not Woodland Hills. This place, please do everything you can to. I know you feel that way, but it's very unusual, and I don't want to lose it, and I don't want anything that threatens it. And I think that most people who live here, they moved here for that reason. Thank you.
Thanks, Dalton. And just let me make one point too before we move on. So I appreciate you mentioning the legislative solution, because I think, we try to be responsive to the residents' concerns and the way the vision they have for the city. The one thing we have to be careful with, because there is an active referendum, there is a fine line that we can walk in terms of even our discussion. So what I'm saying is I am making a plea that as we have a candid discussion about the wherefores and the whys of how we pass this law, that, obviously we'll all be discreet and try to tiptoe that line, but at the same time, I just certainly hope that by engaging in such a conversation, it would not be used against us, because frankly, we do get threatened because of things that are certainly not intended to be sidestepping the law. So that would be my request as far as this conversation is concerned, because I think it's valuable, but none of us wants to get hooked by some errant word that then we get called out as some sort of a criminal malfeasance.
Right,
so
right.
I would hope that would be something that could be appreciated and striven for in our conversation tonight.
I couldn't agree more, and I want you to know that that's certainly our feeling, and with what little influence we may have, the referendum has been actually put on hold to find out what happens here. We're very interested in what you have to say. I have no plans to use anything. Any constructive comment will not be used, certainly by us. Will not be used in any way against you, and I hope that we're honest brokers in that regard. Did you say that?
So, because in answer to your question, why now, which I think is a fair question, there was something that I did not mention to you over the phone that actually I just thought of. And so when we talk about the founding documents of Woodland Hills, the founding document is actually the WUPA charter that was originally developed because Woodland Hills at the time was not a city, it was not a town, it was a homeowners association. Somehow, well, not somehow, I was actually the WUPA president before or just after I moved in, and somehow I got those original documents. And so I've seen them and I've read them. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you that those documents do specify exactly what you're saying. They specify a natural environment, large lots, trees not being cut within so many yards and so forth, so that you have this idea of a wooded, secluded area. So totally agree with you on that. That's what the WUPA charter calls for. 7 or 8 years ago, when WUPA was disbanded, which I will state once again, I feel was the worst decision that has been made in a long time. Because homeowners associations can enforce things that cities cannot. And because of that, when they decided to do away with WUPA, we kind of lost some of that ability to control that. Having said that, at that time, there was this whole WUPA charter and a lot of the different rules and specifications around that were in essential limbo. So, and I know I mentioned this when we met about codification, that the goal was to get the codification done, but then to go see as many things as we could encode into our ordinances from the WUPA charter, as were legally feasible. And so that's been one of the things that's been on the Planning Commission's plate for the last year and a half since codification passed, was to now go back and look at what could we bring over. Now, whether that was an impetus to this or not, I don't know. But the point is that I feel strongly, because I agree with you, I want Woodland Hills to stay the way Woodland Hills is. I don't want to see Elk Ridge and nothing against Elk Ridge. Great town, love the people there. I love Payson, I love Spanish Fork, but they're not Woodland Hills. And I'd like to see Woodland Hills stay as close as we can to Woodland Hills. But in order to do that, there are going to be some ordinance changes that have to be put in place so that we can protect what we have. And again, I'm not arguing whether this one is the right way or the wrong way. I'm just saying that might have been some of the motivation behind doing some of these changes.
Okay, thanks, David. And what I'd like to do is go through everyone here that's here to make public comment, and then I'd like to hear from all the council members that care to weigh in on this. So let's just move this way, David. I know you had your hand up, but anybody, Susan, Rod, anything? Sharon? Okay.
He thinks he can speak for me, but he doesn't.
Okay, I thought that you were a package deal, but.
I haven't felt that way for 45 years.
I was gonna say, we know better.
You know, one of the things that when I spoke to Dave was that I said, why not put it back, undo this rather than putting us all through a referendum? Why not undo it? And he says, why don't we just try to fix it? Fix the definitions, make it right without undoing it. And I have just learned from sad experience, not just in this town, but in other venues, that if you just say, oh, well, we'll do it sometime, it just really doesn't get fixed. And I worry that it leaves us open legally for people who are getting house permits and things and not having to follow the strict guidelines. And so that's one of my concerns. So I think it does need to be reversed and then fixed to a law that we can all agree on, to come up with either call it area, but really, really defined area, or call it open space and keep those safety precautions in place. But to just say, oh, we're just gonna switch it to area and not have any definition for area is I think a dangerous thing. Another thing, and I don't want to say that we have a pattern of jumping to pass a law, but I feel like this was not well thought out or discussed or even publicized. And probably it wasn't because no one thought this was going to be an issue. What's the difference? You know, what's one little word? Who cares about open space versus area? But there is a big difference. If it's not well defined, it is a big difference. And I think that the law as it was, calling it open space, gives you some definite parameters. These are things you can do, and home builders, if they care about following the law, would either choose a home pattern, a home plan that fits the lot they have, or if it doesn't, build someplace else. Don't try to fit this dream home onto a lot that doesn't accommodate it. And I think by changing this law, it does not protect us for people who have their dream home they want to put on a lot, and it just isn't right for that lot.
Okay.
And so they decide they want to switch this or move this or raise this or lower this or whatever. And I think that's dangerous. As the daughter of a very, very strict engineer who would never, ever have said area was okay.
Okay, thanks, Sharon.
So, I don't want to have a referendum either if we don't, because I've got a really busy life, and I'm gonna have to squeeze it in, and it's gonna make my whole family just sad for however long it takes us to get those signatures. So I appreciate Ben, I've been able to speak with Ben, and I appreciate talking to David for a little bit, even though he had COVID, so we didn't get to meet. But I just think that there's a way that we can work through this thing, that we don't have to put everybody through all this. So I'm pleading with you, please, for my whole family, let's not do this referendum. But having said that, this is a hill I'm willing to die on, because I really love it here. Over the weekend, I went to a wedding in California, and I'd never been to San Ramon before, and the little area that I was in is called Bishop's Park. It was so amazingly beautiful. They had all kinds of businesses snugged in the trees that you wouldn't even know they were there unless you really knew the area. It was just a dream. It was just a haven. That's what I love about Woodland Hills. It is a haven. Who hasn't been up here? Even the guys that deliver the business stuff, the UPS guys. Oh, we love coming up here. This is so beautiful. It's just a breath, literally a breath of fresh air. So, as we change the ordinance that's served us so well this long, we open the door to the opportunity to change the expectation. Sharon talked a little bit about, you know, not every home would fit on a lot here, right? And keep those setbacks and things. Not every home's going to accommodate Woodland Hills. So we need to just, as a parent, I had an expectation of what I wanted my children to do growing up, right? And that guided them. That guided them to make good decisions. So I think we need to keep in mind this is an expectation that we want this wooded area, that we want homes that complement the contour, that keep us safe, that keep us from flooding, that if we do have an earthquake, which the way the world's going, maybe sooner than later, so that we're prepared for those things. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I love living here. I moved here because I wanted to be snug down in the trees. And I absolutely love this place, just like we all do. So let's just work this out so that we don't have to have a referendum and we can keep my family happy. I think that's a good idea, don't you? Thank you.
Fair enough.
And thank you for being open to letting us talk. Because that's been a real struggle for me, feeling like in the olden days, we'd come down to the city council meetings and we'd kick stuff around. and make some decisions, and people felt like that they were really heard, so thank you for being willing to listen.
Thanks, Susan. Rod, you got anything or I can move around, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so
I don't wanna be redundant and repeat things that have been said. I totally agree with Dalton and Sharon with the comments that they made. I moved here because of the area, the way it's laid out, and I'm getting too old to have to worry about this stuff. I just hate to see things done that make it suspect as far as what the result may be, and detract from the beautiful city that we have. So, I appreciate your time.
okay, thank you. David?
Sure. I'm in favor of the ordinance for almost the same reasons that we're potentially against it. Let me kind of explain what I mean by that. Is changing it from open space to area, to me, actually helps define it. When I researched open space, and the vast majority of the interpretations, I moved here, almost 23 years ago. Absolutely love it for the exact same reasons. At the same time, I could use what's currently on the books to attack my neighbors, almost every single one of them. And they could do the same for me. Because of whether it's trampoline pits, gardens, you name it, chicken coops, on and on and on. And sadly, we're getting into a world or a time, if you will, of commotion, and neighbor against neighbor, and a litigious kind of an attitude that was not present when I moved in 23 years ago. And so I'm absolutely in favor of the change, and if it needs to be improved for the exact same reasons that have already been stated, to clarify what area means and to preserve Woodland Hills, great, I'm all for that. But what I'm not in favor for is a continuation of what is currently occurring, when, in a sense, sadly, there's some things that are, I'm sorry, not neighborly occurring. And that's my view of it. So I'm absolutely in favor of the change. And then whatever needs to happen to preserve Woodland Hills while doing so.
Thank you. Wayne, do you have anything that you wanted to offer here?
I would just make the comment that the goal was to clarify the ordinance and not change it from what it's been for 30, 35 years. And to continue to allow the same type of yards, primarily, that have existed. They seem to have worked in the city. We didn't want to take away from that, but we had some who felt that using the term open space was restricted in the way that yards and landscaping could be applied. So as we looked at that as a planning commission and took away the terms open space and substituted that for area, that was our intent. Not to change it, but to clarify it and allow Woodland Hills to continue the way it has been developed by way of yards for years and years. We saw nothing wrong with that. And if there's a need to further clarify that, then that's something certainly that can be considered. But it was not to change the way things look, but to perpetuate that and continue with that atmosphere of the way yards were constructed and developed around the homes.
Thank you. John, Jennifer? Did you have something you?
I'm curious, I guess, if it's left as open space, how is that going to be used against people that seemingly don't fit that? I mean, it's being used against people, so, there's only certain ways to build houses, and you can put trees back in, and other people can put trees in if they don't like the way things are, and I'm just curious how it's all gonna fall out, that's all.
I'm just thinking, because I have a huge tiered side garden that was there long before I bought the house. But if one of my neighbors didn't like it, they could interpret open space and they could demand that I rip it out.
Right, it's all a matter of interpretation. Who decides what that means? And how they're going to apply it against other people because they don't like something somebody else is doing.
Thank you. We rode around together on Easter, but I actually don't know your first name.
Brian.
Brian, okay. Brian, do you have anything?
Just a little bit. So I like the idea of the clarification. As we've talked about, it is becoming more and more of a litigious society, and it's no longer, even the short time I've been here, it seems like it's becoming not the Woodland Hills I moved into. The Woodland Hills of 2018, as I spent all those days down with Carrie on the road and seeing many of you come up and down to your homes. So I think we have to clarify, but I think one thing that everybody needs to keep in mind, and what I really appreciate the city council and the mayor in what they do, we all have blinders on, right? We all have blinders on. I have my homeowner blinder, I have my little Woodland Hills community, my, you know, the district I'm in. I have the fire department, and I'm not speaking as a firefighter, so please, just here in case we get a call. But we all have our blinders on, and what I have seen from our city council and our mayor, and I've really enjoyed coming to these meetings and learning more, and learn all the time, is that they are forced, and they have got to take the blinders off. They have to look at it from all sides of this, from let's keep Woodland Hills the same, let's see how we can keep the city from getting sued, let's see how we can keep our neighbors from getting sued, let's see how we can protect our land and protect our wildlife and our everything about this. So understand that there's no pancake thin enough that there's not two sides. There is another side to this, and we all need to keep that open mind. And that's what I appreciate and wanted to say here, is that I appreciate that from our city council and our mayor, to look at this. And I appreciate Wayne and his group that put so much time into this, more than anybody, most of us can imagine, to try to keep Woodland Hills Woodland Hills.
Thank you. Sherry?
I guess when I think about open space, and I've got my PTR hat on, I think of zoning. Like, I would love to see the city council take a look at the trail, which is zoned R2 PUD, and zone that open space. The land up by the water tank is R2 PUD. Should that be open space as well? So when I think about open space, I have a tendency to think about zoning, and I'm hearing things about fences and swing sets, and if my understanding is correct, to exempt city land from an ordinance, it has to be stated in the ordinance. So how would the trail or the park be exempt from this ordinance? Could we put up fences in the park? Could we, whatever this ordinance is creating, how is it going to affect the public land that the city owns? That's my comment.
Okay, an important consideration. All right, Ben, you want to get in on this?
I'm not.
Yeah, I know, I was actually just trying to debate you a little bit. Okay, well, I'd like to turn it over to the council. Ben, you're right here.
Before we do,
Yeah.
you wanna ask if anyone online wants to make a
Oh,
comment?
yeah.
I didn't know we were taking online comments anymore.
Okay, if that's the case, that's fine.
Or was it really?
I think we need this, okay, Joe, we should have the ability to say something.
The council kind of
I don't see
decided,
any hands, so.
council decided at a last meeting that they were just gonna do those who were here at a previous meeting, so I didn't know.
I guess
I'd just like input from everyone.
Thank you.
I'm not a owner of the rule, but I think
I
that's
don't
a wrong
remember us
rule.
making that rule.
We've got a Ted.
Ted has his hand raised.
You guys tell me what you want me to do.
Let him,
Okay.
Yeah, no, let's hear from Ted.
Although, he may have been touching his head.
Smile,
Yeah.
Let's see if we can hear him.
There he is.
Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to add kind of one more thing as being involved in a lot of these things that the city gets involved with, and from a planning commission perspective, from an engineering perspective, that may be one thing to keep in mind is I like everyone has commented, I moved here for a reason. I like the community, like the trees, love living in the trees, want to keep and preserve as much as we can. But sometimes, councils and cities get put in a difficult position because of state laws. We are subordinate to what the state does, and often what perpetuates some of the decisions or some of the things that that the city has to consider comes from state laws that get passed. And that then trickles down to cities who have to sometimes change their ordinances or their codes and things like that. So to keep in compliance, or I guess in legal aspects of the state. So just want to keep that in mind. I appreciate these difficult positions that the councils and mayor gets put in, having to come back and look at these things often when states change their laws. So just keeping that in mind as we think through these things, that often it even is not driven by what happens in the community. Sometimes these things are driven by what the state is doing. So just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. All right. Now, Ben.
Is there any others?
No other hands are raised.
So I had the great opportunity to meet, with Susan and Sharon and Dalton. Well, yes, I always get you S's confused. But it was a joy, and I was able to learn a lot, and also I hope kind of portray my thoughts and feelings as to why I voted the way I did. I take my votes as a council member very seriously, one for their legal purposes, but also just because I feel it is a part of the integrity to which I hope to espouse too. And for me, as I was speaking with everybody, I decided, you know what, I would be more than happy to vote to appeal or to shift if I felt like the ordinance itself did make us vulnerable to the primary concern. And I believe that as I've spoken with many people, the primary concern is we want Woodland Hills to be able to remain Woodland Hills, defined by kind of an emotional point to which we all possess. The trees, the feeling, the environment, the uniqueness, which is Woodland Hills. As I've kind of gone through everything, and I've tried to look at it from as many as Brian put, without my blinders on, I still am not 100% convinced that what the change was brings us into a state of vulnerability, because I refuse to allow us to give permission to, maybe it is if we're having a delta right now between ordinance change and people submitting building plans and then any definition, definement, or the rescinding of the amendment. If there's anything in there that has any concern that we will have somebody who wants to just clear cut a lot or something of that nature, I do not want that. So as I've gone through these definitions, I have found that there are some things that I would love to see potentially shift. Currently, the new amendment reads, an area extending the full width of the lot between a building and the front lot line, unoccupied and unobstructed from the ground upward, except as hereafter specified. As I've gone through it, those last four words that I think cause a lot of the potential confusion, except as hereafter specified, meaning the rest of chapter 10. Chapter 10 then defines what you can and cannot do, and Wayne, correct me if I'm speaking fake news. But this is where we're then defined what you can and cannot do when it comes to retaining walls, when it comes to sheds, when it comes to parks, swing sets, any of these things. And so it does tell us exactly what that is. If you then also go, if I can find it, over to our chapter 10 definitions, like Dalton read, but I want to just kind of hit it again if possible. Under open space, it says the use of land which leaves soil generally undisturbed and upon which natural vegetation, whether or not native to the area, occupies the major visible aspect of the land. Generally undisturbed, I think, is a very, I would define that as somewhat vague. I don't know if your legal hat can be put on, but I don't know if we could defend generally undisturbed.
I'm not the city's attorney, so
Okay.
I'm not worried about that.
He's wiser than I am. But that's kind of that my fear is. So I believe that a few definitions or even another subset of ordinance, if we're looking to try and make sure we do define exactly what we mean by preserving the native look and feel of Woodland Hills, I would potentially be able to argue that the previous ordinance didn't define that as well as potentially we might have thought it did. In short, I personally feel that the amendment did make some clarifications, and especially as Ted was placing, and maybe I hope to not put words in his mouth. But as state law, and as Dalton, you referenced, there's many states across the nation who use and define a precedence around open space. And so I want to make sure we have that clarity. Open space sometimes can be defined, and naturally usually does, as public land, which then also potentially could cause us problems. To wrap everything up, I personally want to maintain the standards, view, feelings, and the beauty of our wonderful city. And as Susan said, it's a hill I'm willing to die on also, because that's why I wanted to run, for mayor, and now as a council member, because I have 3 little boys. I have my wife, and we're hoping to be here for many decades left. And I would hate to have the feel that we love about this place shift and change. And so that's one of the reasons I'm here. So thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All right, David, do you have anything further?
Well, other than I've heard the consensus, and the consensus is we all want to maintain the look and feel. The question is how to do that. I think that's really the question. I don't know anyone that would want to clear cut Woodland Hills. So, having said that, a couple of questions. So, if we were to repeal that, which again, I am totally always in favor of finding the best solution. And if repeal is the best solution after we have this discussion, then I'm fine with that. But I do agree with the comments that Ben made that we have to change something. Just because I don't feel like the current definitions are adequate. And so that would be kind of a question, because again, the Planning Commission had a lot of meetings on this, had these discussions. The City Council had the meetings regarding them. We had 2 public hearings. So at what point, what would the process look like if we were to try and fix this? Who would we get together? How would it be different than the process we just went through that led us to this point where we're not satisfied? So what would that process look like? That is an important, super important question to me, because it can't just be that we do the same thing and again, we miss the target and so then we're back where we are today. I don't want that. And more importantly, I feel super, super, super strongly that so much of the angst and the animosity that has occurred over the last 3 years is just flat out wrong. And not only flat out wrong, but unnecessary. I mean, we are friends. feel like the faster we can get rid of that, the more productive we can be together. As a city, we deserve to work together. We're smart people, we're intelligent, there is no reason for this animosity to exist. Now, there's one other thing that I want to mention, and that is, we talked about variances. I think part of the problem has been that the role of the variance committee has always been to enable building. In other words, if we talk about a house not fitting, or we talk about a lot that it presents structural problems or presents building problems, the role of the variance committee has always been to find a way, to figure it out so that we can build. It's never been to be to basically be a no, you cannot do this. Now, it is to be a no if there are other less obtrusive ways of doing it. So that is the role of the variance committee. It has always been that role. What has happened over the last 2 years is that role is, and part of the reason why I think the variance committee struggled so mightily is because all of a sudden they were being asked to stop things from happening, when in fact it's their role to make it possible for things to happen. And that's just a fundamental shift that I don't think we as a city were prepared for. Now, should we stop things from happening? Yes, but within that realm of we want to do it in the least obtrusive way possible. So if somebody wanted to come in and bring, do some crazy car elevator for their front driveway because they need to get up a hill, and we can find a different way of doing it that's less obtrusive, then that should be the path that we recommend to the builder. But nevertheless, the ultimate goal has always been to make it possible for them to build, just in the least obtrusive way possible. And I think that that has been a fundamental misunderstanding. Now, when it comes to this ordinance, again, I feel strongly about maintaining the way that we look. And if we find that this definition doesn't get us there, then let's figure out that process and let's get there, because we all love Woodland Hills. We all want it to maintain the way it mostly looks today. That's not the question. Nobody on either side of this feels that way, but anyway, we just need to figure out what that process looks like.
Thanks. Doral?
Thank you, Mayor. My heart is beating tremendously fast, and we have people in the room that mean a lot to me. And I want to first of all say, Dalton, when you first spoke and started this discussion tonight, equally important to what you said, I loved how you said it. You spoke, as we've all agreed, we love it here. This is my favorite place on earth I've ever lived, and my goal in my work in the city is to keep it the way we love it. And I just appreciate the way you started the discussion, because I feel awful that I didn't dare call Sharon or Susan. And honestly, the only reason I didn't wasn't because of this ordinance or this stuff we're arguing or talking about. It's the other stuff that's underneath it all that I'm terrified. I speak freely. I get on the phone with Sharon and I have the greatest chats, and I speak freely, and I was fearful of being recorded and doing something that would harm the city. Even though I really like you, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you what I'm thinking, and I would have done that. I picked up the phone 4 or 5 times a day and almost called, but I didn't dare. And this is the thing that concerns me more than anything in our city, is there are people that I can't talk to because I'm afraid of where it will go and how I will have hurt the city unintentionally, of course. So, after hearing Dalton speak, I would be happy to talk to you on the phone for endless time. I sense that your intentions are positive and in line with building this city and not tearing it down. I don't feel that's true with everyone in the city now, and that's a sad place for me to be, because I don't like to have any enemies, and I try to fix anyone that potentially might be my enemy. Same with you, Susan. I really wanted to call you, but I didn't know. I didn't know what you were going to do with what I said. And I'm not the smartest brick in the pile here either, so I have to be careful about what I say privately. But I want, more important than this ordinance, I want you all to help us fix what's broken.
That's why we're here.
And you know,
We're trying.
well, I don't know why it's so hard, because we all love the things we have here. And there's not much wrong with it, right? I mean, this is great what we have here. And it started, I'll be honest with you, it started back when we had a referendum over codification. That bugged the heck out of me, because along with that term was, we aren't trusted. The council isn't trusted. We're trying to take the city down the toilet. It was that impression I got because it was told to me. We don't trust anybody on the council. It's gone in the toilet. So that has never happened in the years I've been on the council. I don't know of anyone who was evil-minded or trying to destroy something. Never. I have never seen that. Everyone here is just like you. You know, we got elected to try to serve the city to our best ability, and none of us are ever, nor have we ever, tried to do something for the wrong reasons. And I want, that's the truth. I've watched it for 9 years now, and that's the truth. So I don't ever want to be in a position where I can't call you because I don't trust you. That's my problem, and I want to get rid of that feeling. But we're still in a state of lots of us not trusting each other. Not lots, but a few of us, and I want to get rid of that, and I would do anything in our power, my power, to fix that, including visiting others in person that aren't here. I don't understand. Anyway, I'm concerned about protecting this city from burning down. And I know, because I've seen it in other cities, where you let wild grass, undisturbed grass, if you will, grow tall on my boundary perhaps, and fire spreading quickly because it isn't mowed or it isn't groomed in some manner that might be more fire-wise. So I'm thinking, you know, open space means you leave it the heck alone and let everything grow out of control there, and go with prayer, if you will, that we don't burn. So it's important that we think of all the things that we want to do to preserve the beauty of our city. And sometimes a little grooming of an edge is better than not. And I've seen it. I just came back from Vail, Colorado on a week-long fire study of situations in city exactly like ours, where they're burned to the ground because of no defensible space and improperly handled vegetation. So if area is the term that helps us not burn, I'm all for it. But I think I've just really enjoyed hearing your opinions and especially the way you said it. I want to thank you for that. I also have a strong feeling of letting homeowners run their land, use their land to the best of their choices. And we have to try to allow that as best we can, with assuming there's intelligence intelligence involved and they're handling it responsibly for us around them. But again, thank you for coming tonight, and Sharon, I apologize for not calling you because it's bugged me.
That's me too.
Well, and so I won't let that happen again, but I'm just nervous, and I hope you can understand why. I don't want to hurt the city. And I would speak so openly with you that if I were recorded, it could be, you could just nail me, you know.
You can be assured I don't know how to record anymore.
Well, thank you for forgiving me for not doing that, but I fought the urge. But I'm so glad you're here tonight. I just can't tell you how proud I am that you'll come and be in this room with us and help us figure this out. Because I think we need help. I will say on the other hand, though, that I do trust our planning commission. I've worked with them for long enough years, long enough time. Their intent is positive for the city as well. I really believe that, and I appreciate their service. And they were unanimous, and we were unanimous, and so here we are. But I would rather do what we're doing right now than do referendum each time we disagree. I think we can talk about this and fix it, That's what I want to do. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Will. All right, Janet.
Sharon's heard me tell this before, but I lived in Payson for 25 years before I moved here. We used to go on Sunday drives every Sunday, and for 25 years I dreamed of living in Woodland Hills, and it wasn't until I took a risk and took a different job and got a big pay raise that I could even consider moving into the house that I'd had my eye on for 3 years. And so I love Woodland Hills. I work in Pleasant Grove. I drive on the freeway. It wasn't so long ago that I got in a horrific car accident and my car was nearly totaled and I was hurt. And to come home at night, to get off the freeway and to hit the woods, I can relax, my stress of the day is gone, and everything about Woodland Hills that you talked about, Dalton, is what I love about and have dreamed about all these years. And I'm gonna live here until I can't plow the snow anymore, or until someone runs me out of town, maybe, that may happen. But for me, voting for this ordinance was a practical matter, because the way it was written, it's non-enforceable. Almost every single citizen in our community is in violation of the ordinance the way it was written. I am. I have a fence that's within guidelines. I just put up a greenhouse. I went and got a permit. I know you have the concern that people are gonna do things and clear cut and do, I just put up a little 10 by 12 greenhouse and I went to the city and got it approved. I drew out plans, I did all the things to make sure that I was in compliance because I didn't want to do anything wrong. So I don't see that happening. Maybe I'm naive, but I just don't see people destroying their lot just because they can. We're working, if you look at the other items on the agenda tonight, we're looking at being able to enforce our ordinances. We're working on an agreement with the sheriff. We actually have a fine schedule in here for people that make offenses. You know, they do things against the ordinances so that we can have a first time fine, a second time fine, and a third time fine. That's all in here in our packet for tonight. One of the biggest criticisms and one of the things I heard when we were running for office was that, you know, Woodland Hills doesn't enforce anything. Well, the way this ordinance was written, it was not enforceable. It can't be enforced. And we're trying to clean things up. So for me, when I voted for it, it was a practical matter. We're trying to clean things up, make it more clear, and make it enforceable. As far as, you know, we have building ordinances, we have development ordinances, all those things that will preclude, I think, a lot of the concerns that were raised. But if there's a hole in it somewhere, then I think we need to look at that. And we, like I say, maybe there's more we can do. Maybe we need to define area a little bit more. I'm open to that, 100%. But I just don't see that it can stay open space because written that way, it's unenforceable, and I'm out of compliance because I have a garden and I have a greenhouse and I have a sidewalk and I have a couple driveways. So I think for me it was a good change. Maybe we need to clarify it a little bit more, and like I say, I'm open to that if that would help.
coming, and I apologize too, I was out of town and unavailable to meet. Most of you know that I grew up on 100 acres of woods in North Idaho Forest, on Lake Coeur d'Alene. So my front porch was the lake. I could walk down to my property on my dock and sit and put my feet in the water. My driveway was 3 to 5 miles long. Talk about being in the woods, right? I love the woods. I love being around the trees. So when we decided nearly 35 years ago to find our home, we came to Woodland Hills. And there weren't very many homes on this mountain at that time. And so we kind of had our pick. And I said to Mylan, I want the ones with the tallest trees. I don't need the view, I need the trees. And that's what we did. And we built our house that we've raised all of our kids here. And I feel the same exact way. That quality of life that we have here, the neighbors, the friends that we've built up over the decades are really, really important. We have those friendships that have transcended our kids being raised together, going to participating in things at school together, things here in the community, different committees that we've served on, our ecclesiastical relationship here, callings that we've had. All of those things have come together to be community. And I think that's what we get afraid of as our community expands. We don't have the same type of relationships that we used to have. I remember when somebody asked me when my kids were little, don't you worry about, strangers running around Woodland Hills and your kids just riding their bikes wherever? And I said, no, because they could go to any door and knock on it and know who lived there and go inside. No fear of my kids not knowing our neighborhood, not knowing our city. And so I think that, like what everybody else said, some of the reasons were of changing from open space to area made a practical sense for us. It made practical sense of why we're going to do things, not out of fear, but out of an obligation to make sure that we maintain our quality of life. I took a few notes. So, of course, when we moved in, WUPA was there. The rule was you could not chop down any tree that wasn't in the footprint of your home. None at all. And we chopped down hundreds of trees just to build our house because that's how wooded our lot was. Now, some on the other side have hardly any trees. We know that. We all chose to live on the side with the trees. Those who came later have to have the scrub oak, right? And that other side over by oak. And there's a reason that it's called oak and not maple. But we chose the side that had trees. And that was important to me. Now, we do, though, have to look at our whole community. Because there will be places, we can drive by the Reeds and not even see their beautiful garden. We're lucky enough that they let us in to view it, and we all go, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. But we also have to drive by the people who live on the other side of town, whose gardens are right there to be visible because they have no trees. Not because they cut them down, but they just don't have them. So our ordinance had to be pertaining to our whole community. And as Ryan said, take the blinders off and kind of look and make sure that everyone felt like they had an equal opportunity for private property rights without infringing on anyone else. So the setbacks are in place. The permitting process, what Janet talked about, is in place. If you want to have an outbuilding of any sort, whether it be a greenhouse or your shed, those have to be permitted. If you want a fence, right? Now, we don't have a permit for a swing set, and I'm glad we don't. Because again, what Doral said, we want to be able to let people do what they choose to do on their private property that gives them an additional quality of life. It's important that we have that in place. Now, one thing that hasn't been talked about is kind of what Ted and Doral alluded to was state law and the other laws that we have adopted. And one of them is the urban interface, urban wildland interface laws that we have that protect us from additional fire. That means that we do ask you to make sure your grasses aren't tall, to make sure that there's a defensible space around your home. That means additional trees have to be cut. It does not mean clear cut though. I think most people who come up here want that ambiance, want that quality of life, and will maintain whatever it takes to keep their trees. But we do have that in place. During the fires of 2018, that was one thing that was brought to our attention when the Type 1 incident team came into place to fight our fire. You know, they're used to going to communities that have more affluence, and they came in and they saw that we had defensible space. They saw that we have been doing chipping for 10 years. They saw that we cared about our community enough to mitigate fire. And so we do ask people to cut trees. Even if they don't want to cut the trees, we say, I'm so sorry, but this is defensible space, and it's important not just for you, but for the neighborhood, for our whole community. So these are the kinds of things that we have to look at in an overall sense of how do we maintain quality of life. We also then maintain the safety of our community. We also maintain our permitting process. We maintain some of the other things that have been brought up by all of you, as well as those of you in the community who have expressed your opinions. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. I mean, Sherry brought up stuff that we hadn't thought about with what about our public lands? Have we been thinking about that? That's why it's important to have community engagement. And that's why I think that it's important for us to dialogue and say, is there something that we can do that tweaks this a little bit to make it so that it is clear without being restrictive of the beautiful garden or the swing set or the shed in these side and backyards, but not necessarily give permission to just change our whole ambiance. And I think that's an important thing to note. I too, like I said, I moved here for the trees specifically. Remember when we used to have the trees in the middle of the road? And that was a selling point, wasn't it? Because we came, and then one day someone said, you know what? That really is a fire magnet. And we went, no. And they came and they chopped them down without even thinking twice, because they knew for the betterment of the community, we needed to have a fire break, and our streets need to be fire breaks, not just modes of transportation. And so we were willing, kind of kicking and screaming, to cut those trees down in the middle of our roads. But it has been a benefit. It was a benefit during the fires to have those in place. So again, I echo what all of the rest of the council has said, and I appreciate that you've come here. And I hope that we can, if we need to change the wording, if something doesn't make sense, that we can come to an agreement on that wording so that we don't have to have a referendum. I think it's better for all. I don't think that there's one person in town, if we asked them, that they wouldn't want to preserve the quality of life that we love. So.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks for everyone for your comments. The one thing that I did want to just briefly touch on, now I'm not a voting member of the council, and I'm not speaking for the council, but I think to Doral's point, one of the real challenges that we have is we sort of become tribal as a city. We kind of are siding with one property owner or another property owner, whether it's in our conduct or just in our points of view. But I think that what that does, so Dalton, as you and I spoke, you know, honestly, when I was calling you, I was very uneasy, and that's, you know, I think to Doral's point, it was something like, man, this is about open space, but it's really about something else that underlies the referendum, and that is my concern. And so I think that, you know, when we first were presented with the ordinance concerning the changing of the term from open space to area, to me it seemed innocuous. It seemed like, that's no big deal. And then, perfectly candidly, when I saw Tannen and Megan submit a protest to it, the thing that came to my mind is that they want to use that against the Adams. And that made me take it with a grain of salt. And that made me feel like, well, I'm not sure that this is something that's being done in the best interest of the city. It seems like it's something that has an ulterior motive. I'm not saying I'm right, but that is something that I think that we have kind of allowed ourselves to fall into is this sort of tribalism. Sherry, you have mentioned that you think that our city needs to hold a fast to heal these things. And honestly, I mean, you know, we are neck deep in legal disputes with the Fuges right now. Recent filings have been submitted, and we're in a frenzy to try to address those. I do think that is really what is interfering, though, with our ability to have conversations about open space in a meaningful and constructive way. And so if there's a way that we can get around that, I mean, I'm working to try to find a way out of that. I hope all parties concerned are, because to me, that's impairing us at every level. And so that would be my plea to the residents of this city is if we can get past that, then I think that these kinds of conversations will be much easier to have and much more constructive, because then we're not all on edge, you know, like what's behind this? And then it can really be about open space. So anyway, that's me on my soapbox.
July 3rd for the fest.
Okay, and a great idea and a great suggestion. All right, well, I hope that this has felt like it's been constructive and meaningful. I do, again, thank everyone for your coming and participating in this. You're certainly welcome to stay for the remaining items on the work session, but I think that's probably...
Now, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, Janet was asking if anyone had any follow-up questions or comments. I was really hoping my speech would kind of wind it up.
No, I just wondered
if
anyone had a follow-up question.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. One is, Ben talked about the ambiguity of minimally moving dirt. Would you read that to us again? From the open space. Generally undisturbed. Well, I think that we could all figure out that generally undisturbed would not mean bringing in a dump truck of dirt, but a wheelbarrow would be okay, but a dump truck wouldn't. So I'm not bothered by that, but I am bothered, and I'm concerned about changing the topography of ground because of mudslides. And as I told you, we have 2 lots up above us that we own, but should we ever decide to sell them, we could be right in mudslide areas. And so I think to just say, oh, well, it's not addressable. I think we could address mudslides and things. So you've talked about trees. I think changing the topography of the ground is really important. I think there are some definitions that really, really are important to define, to clarify, but it still can be an open space. I also just heard you say, we just close our minds instantly if the Fuge's name is on it. And that makes me feel sad because they have some good ideas.
That's not what I said.
That's not what he said.
Well,
I did not say close our
sounded-
minds. I said that Sharon, you can't dispute the reality that the Adams, they get dinged for everything that they do. I mean, that is the reality. Now, it's not that I'm closed-minded, but that's the reality of what we are facing.
I understand that, but to just say, I don't even want to, we all went into this, we all took a stand against the Fuges because their name was on it. That's too
No,
bad.
that's what, I made that clarification. I said my opinion when I first saw that was there was an ulterior motive there. And that is my opinion. And again, I'm trying to have a candid conversation because it does seem, my observations in the past few months have been that is something that is consistent with how it has played out. So that was my opinion. And I wasn't trying to, I really don't want to make this, my point was that, in my opinion, underlies the real problem, though. That everyone is dug in their respective sides, and that is what I believe is an impairment to our having conversations about things like open space, which really should have nothing to do with the Adams or the Fuges property. I mean, that should be something that is so, but I don't think that we can ignore the elephant in the room, that is something that does at least enter some of our minds. I mean, and so maybe it doesn't enter yours, but I think that, if I'm being perfectly honest, it it is something that I do consider. So it's not that fuges, I'm against it. That's not my position at all. That's never been my position.
Mayor, can I have a, when we passed this, every single one of us, we weren't thinking of the Adams Fuge situation.
No, I understand that.
When we passed the ordinance, I was shocked when we got the referendum, if I'm being honest.
Well, and I was
Because
too.
I was surprised that there was an objection to it.
I understand, I agree that it seems so innocuous. But
Right.
there is a big difference between leaving an area that's totally undefined without any protections. That is concerning.
But there are all the other protections, the building ordinances, the fence ordinances, the setback ordinances. We have all those other things.
But there is
that
an
protect.
undefined.
I have something to say to your first point about not disturbing the land. I mean, a lot of times it depends on where your lot was located, right? An uphill slope versus a downhill slope. Now, just for an example, I'll use my own home. You know, we're on the downhill side of the street. So when we had to put in our driveway, it wasn't one dump truck of dirt to make it in compliance with the steepness of the driveway, which is a building standard. It could only be at a certain slope. In order for us to get to that slope and make it so that we could come in and out of our home in the buildable space, I think it was about 60 truckloads. It does not look like that. It doesn't look like we disturbed it a lot, but that was what needed to be compacted so that engineeringly it would be qualified for a sound driveway, but also comply with the steepness of the driveway. And so each person, as they come before, and we have the building standards in place, we have our process that we go through for approving a home on a buildable space. Now, the planning commissions from years past to present, every lot in Woodland Hills that is for sale or is to be built upon was approved by the planning commission to be platted, the city council to be platted, and the county to be platted. So there are 3 governing bodies that have approved that plat. Now, in that, they don't say what needs to be done for that home to be built. They just say it is buildable. Then it's up to the homeowner to be able to comply with all of the regulations that are in place and go through the process again through the planning commission and through engineering and everything else to be able to build on that property. So I use my home as an example. Some other people in here may have had something similar happen to their home in order to make their lot buildable. It doesn't mean necessarily totally undisturbed. We still have, most of our lot is still, unquote, quote unquote, undisturbed. We haven't done a lot, but we made it safe for us to get in, and I think that that has occurred all through our city without necessarily cutting down a lot of trees or changing the ambiance of who we are.
Yeah, I had to bring in 3 loads of dirt in a dump truck just to do a front lawn.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, well, and actually, so what I'm gonna do is Jen, I know you had your hand up, and then Sherry, you, and I think that we've all made our points and our cases, I think. So I think that hopefully we're at a good stopping point.
I do think there's.
Well, everyone except Dave has, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. One very important thing, I'm just noticing that this is not on our city council agenda to take a vote, so there will be no vote taken tonight.
Right, yeah, no, it was just a discussion. And I hope that was not the expectation that there would be a vote.
And I appreciate the input, because like I say, when we voted on it, it was just a working matter to clarify, and so I appreciate you coming and giving us your input.
Okay, Jenny.
I would just like to say that we'd like the opportunity to finish, to do the landscaping, to put trees in, to, do all the things that we're supposed to do. We just haven't been allowed to finish. And so I feel like we're being judged on possibilities, something that might happen, something that, I don't know, but I think, so it's a little frustrating. We came up here for the trees and the ambiance as well, and it's been extremely difficult. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you. All right, John, you weren't on the list, but.
I'm not on the list. Everybody says, oh, they come up here because they feel safe. To be honest and truthful, we don't feel safe. We feel threatened constantly. No matter what we do, no matter what we say, no matter anything, immediately we are being attacked.
And the other side doesn't come to talk to us at all. They just take for granted what they're being told is accurate, and it's not, it's a little frustrating.
And all I did was want to come and build my own home. How dare me?
Okay, well, thank you for your comments. Sherry, something nice and warm.
Actually, this is warm,
Fuzzy.
well, warm and very fuzzy. What I'm hearing tonight between the citizens and the city council and you, Mayor, is incredible progress. It shouldn't come to the point where a citizen feels like they have to file a referendum because that's all they can do because you don't listen or you don't move forward. Or I heard David Pratt say, okay, where do we go from here? Okay, where do we go from here? Do you want wording submitted that might make the definition more clear? Do you want to put this on the city council meeting for a vote the next time you meet? If the concerned citizens leave here tonight knowing a way forward, there's no need for a referendum. So what do we do? Where do we go next? That's my warm and fuzzy.
Yeah, well, that's not as warm or as fuzzy as that.
We could go to planning commission, is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that what would have to happen is it would have to get presented to the planning commission, and they could provide some language that hopefully addresses the concerns that have been raised, and obviously everyone has an opportunity to provide input into that. So I think we have to go through the usual processes that we go through with any legislation. So it would go to the planning commission. So I would say that would be the series of steps, is that, and Wayne, I don't know when the planning commission's next meeting is, but it's.
We're gonna hold a public hearing also because it's a land use change, so we begin.
But would you want to deliberate on the language before you had anything like that? I mean, it seems to me that that would be putting the cart before the horse a little bit.
Not necessarily, because we could ask for public input for their ideas on language.
Okay.
And then take that into consideration as language is crafted that addresses some of the concerns that were raised tonight.
But isn't that what a public hearing does? We've had planning have public hearings, you've
Yeah,
had public hearings, but people are saying they don't know about them. How can we correct that too?
The thing is, you don't wanna start with a blank slate in a public hearing, cause
Okay.
that would be just way too wide open.
Right.
So it's better if you have some proposed language, and then you bring the proposed language to the public hearing, and now there's things that you can discuss. If you just come with a blank slate, it's.
And I would imagine that the planning commission would have some language that they would, have as their starting point.
And
So
we have a lot of public hearings that nobody shows up to.
That's my point.
And
Because we don't.
But it's on, we're not ever.
It's on the
Right,
website.
that was,
It's impossible.
I'm gonna take responsibility for that because we were using Everbridge.
And it was wonderful.
But it was also, what we didn't want is we didn't want people to ignore emergency related notices because it's just another, some meeting that they didn't have much interest in. So we're aware of it, and Sharon, you mentioned that when we had our
Well, we all
conversation.
got messages about quit putting your branches out for chipping, so obviously a public hearing could be
And that the Easter
advertised.
Bunny
Well,
was
well,
coming.
what happens is,
that's the really important stuff.
That was the last
on
one.
Everbridge, there's a whole list of things that you can and can't get, right? And what we had is people signed up for everything. And then they were getting 6 or 7 or 8 texts and emails a day, so they were unsubscribing to everything.
Yeah.
And so
It's
that
a workable
was, so that was
we
one
can
of the
fix it.
things. So right now, we put it on the website, we put it every time we have a newsletter, it's in the newsletter that we have a public
I
hearing.
always used to get the
And-
newsletters and haven't for 3 months, so
We-
why is that? Why are we not getting
Yeah.
things that we always have in the past?
We can talk about that. I mean,
I'll talk
and
about during my report on the communication tonight, but.
So just to reiterate, we probably would have already had this discussion if we would have known that there were public hearings.
okay.
And it's not like everybody's just watching the website every 5 minutes to see when a meeting comes up. I mean, I don't even look at my email unless somebody texts me and tells me they sent me one.
It is posted
Well, then
on
what do you
the
want more emails from
mailboxes,
us
too.
for? All right, okay, then I think that we've probably beat this horse long enough, so we'll move on. And those who, like I said, care to stay, you're welcome to, or if
Anyone who wants to know about the new development plan with Summit Creek,
Yep.
that's what our next thing is.
Okay, well, so we'll give you 30 seconds to leave if you want, otherwise we're moving on. Okay. All right.
I won't even take 30 seconds, I'll just leave now.
No, we're counting.
But your wife is still here.
That's her problem.
No,
She
she's
doesn't
typing
sleep,
it.
so you guys know, she doesn't sleep. All she does is city stuff. I'm sure she does most of it for free.
She does, we know.
I yell at her weekly.
And
I think we probably since it's happened a year.
All right, well, so let's go on. Oh, okay, yeah. I hope everything's okay. All right, discussion of a proposed master development agreement for Summit Creek. David, is that on you?
I don't think so. At this point, it's on the council. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read it. It's incredible reading. I mean, riveting
I
from
read it beginning all.
to end.
Just so you know, I read it all.
Well, you're a contract person, so.
I made it through twice.
I read everything.
Yeah, so just comments. I mean, go ahead.
So, 2.9, reimbursements, I have a question. So it says, to the extent that developer is required by the city to construct improvements of any kind outside of the project or to oversize improvements beyond, anyway, just saying that if the developer has to make improvements that, the developer shall receive reimbursement from the city in accordance with city standards and specifically Woodland Hills City Code Title 11. So my question is, can the developer just do whatever they want and build a city? I know this is I know, but I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
Or does it have to be pre-approved? Is there something in here, and maybe it's in the city code title 11, chapter 8, but is there something that says that the city gives the developer permission to do that extra development before they bill us? That's my question.
Okay, so let's go back to what this is specifically talking about. So this is specifically talking about the area the roads that we vacated and that now need improvements that, well, I shouldn't say now. They've needed improvements all along.
Yeah.
So some of them are gas lines, some of them are rock line dishes, some of them are water, electricity. So basically what Summit Creek is agreeing to is that they will do those improvements that were always promised to the people that bought those lots.
Right, that's when we vacated that.
Right, so that's step one of this. The step two is that if it is legal for the city to seek reimbursement as part of the permitting process, then the city is obligated to do so and then reimburse Summit Creek for the cost of those improvements.
That was just my question.
I say that with a big fat if, because at the time that we were discussing it, we weren't sure whether the city could, since those lots were purchased under the, with those improvements already planned, or already supposed to happen, and they never did happen. And so, anyway, the city, if we can, if our lawyers say that we can put that in as part of the permit process, then we need to do that. Ben, or is that?
And my concern is just making sure that both sides are protected.
Yeah.
And that there's
And I think-
clarification or, does
Yeah.
that make sense, my question?
Very much so, and I think, I'm glad you asked the question, because I agree, that was one of the last sections that we worked on, was this whole idea of the reimbursements, and what if they can't get reimbursed? For instance, Ted Mickelson actually has, his house borders one of the roads that's going to be improved, but he's already got a house there. So can Summit Creek be reimbursed for that? And the answer is no. That's an existing home. The city has no mechanism to collect money from Ted anymore. So so Summit Creek just had to take that on.
Ready for some more questions?
I have some too.
Go ahead, Carrie.
No, you go
Ladies
first.
first.
No, you go first. I heard it.
I understand it's a 10-year term with probably a renewal after that, another 10 years. Is that the, so we could potentially be looking at 20 years. I hope, and Ben, I'm looking at you, I hope that this agreement that it helps more than hurts our relationship, which I feel is a very good one with you as a developer. I would vote against this if it deteriorates our relationship, because that is important to us as a city, that we, just like in the past, we've worked very well together, and I think asked and you've given, and you've asked and we've given, and I just hope that that continues, even though we've got all this print now underneath it all. I'll just throw that out there. I see a section in there about a pole or two of new sirens. There's no timeline on that, and I'm perfectly happy with it waiting until that area is developed, and maybe we study where you can hear and not hear. So I'm glad to see that those sirens were put in, Dave, and to give those residents over there an ear to some of our emergency notifications. And I think I'm okay that when is not described, but I'm assuming as it's developed, we will watch that. And I was a little bit surprised that our fee schedules, current fee schedule was included in that document. Because those things change like every couple of months, and I don't know how that works. I have a feeling our water rates are going to rise again when we do some more water work. It's just kind of what happens when you spend millions on water in the city. I don't think those water rates are good for 10 years, but that's just me thinking. So I ask if there's any input on that. And why are fee schedules inside there, and does that mean those fees are the same forevermore? I don't think it means that, but and then there's this section about traffic calming, and I just wondered if there's any confusion between Summit Creek and Woodland Hills about actual work on Summit Creek Drive for calming, you know, whether that bill is paid for by the city or by Summit Creek. And
So can I answer that question?
Yeah, please.
So when it comes to the traffic calming, the agreement is that if we as a city decide we need to do traffic calming, that we will contact Summit Creek, and they may desire to do something more than what the city would like to. It's always more. And if that's the case, then Summit Creek will pay the difference between what the city was going to do versus what they're proposing.
So the speed signs that we have now, that's, you know, an example, right? And they offered to pay for their own.
Yeah.
But we would have if they
Yeah, the one on Summit Creek Drive, we donated or gave to the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a better example, which they actually have in some of their exhibits, is they're considering like speed bridges.
Yeah.
Or things like that are way beyond what we as a city would ever pay for. And Summit Creek is essentially saying, we will pay the difference between what you were going to do and what we want to do. And again, that's to maintain the look and ambiance that they're trying to develop over there.
Okay. Yeah, and we've been good at working out details like that, so I hope that continues in the future. I have been privy to some of their plans for traffic calming, and you're right, it's unique, and they're really wanting to do that as their residents have requested. So we have to
But
make sure.
again, they can't
like-
just come in and put something in on Summit Creek Drive. That's not okay.
I'm assuming it'll go through the regular procedures and we'll
Yeah.
see it and can talk about it, okay? I think I'll turn it over to Carrie. Thank you.
I had some of the same concerns, so then I'm feeling much better. One of it was the sirens. I think that that's an important part, not to leave open-ended of when we put them up though, because it is one of our first mechanisms of letting our citizens know. It's also part of our pre-fire mitigation, is to be able to have our safety drills. And I think that's an important aspect to have as soon as we know that someone's starting to build. Maybe they're strategically placed, but I think it's an important thing. We would hate for one person on that street to say, I never heard a siren, right? And not evacuate, because that's one of the things that we rely on. I think that needs to be defined. As far as the fees go, again, I had that same concern. There's no way that I think that we should lock our fees in from today for the next 20 years, because fees will change over the course of time. And whether it's an impact fee, whether it's a current fee to use the park, or any other fee, I think it should be more of whatever the fee schedule is at the time of the building, that's the fee schedule being used. Because I think that's important. The traffic calming was another thing that I was interested in. Of course, at this point, those private roads, I think that's what we're talking. Are we only talking about traffic calming on the new private roads, or are we talking on Summit Creek Drive as well?
This was that section, I believe. Sorry, I'm jumping.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at you,
okay.
yeah.
I think that specifically was for Summit Creek Drive.
Okay, and so I just wanted to make sure that that has been addressed with our Public Works Director with regards to snowplow removal, and to make sure that whatever is put in place is not increasing either the risk to our drivers or to the risk of our equipment that we all have to pay for. We know that those blades are really, really expensive, and the rest of our residents are the ones that ultimately pay for those. And I don't want anything put into place. I understand the need for traffic calming, but I don't want anything put into place that adversely affects the rest of the city in terms of how many blades are broken because of whatever's put into place.
What is done will be with the approval of the city.
Okay.
So Corbett will be very much involved in those decisions as to the design of them and so forth, to make sure that they're compatible and not take away from the things that we're doing throughout the rest of the city.
Okay.
The other kind of underlying thing that I wanted to mention, just because a few of you kind of hinted at it, none of the development agreement takes away from our current plat approval process. So the plats still have to go through the plat approval process.
All steps.
So when it comes to things like when will the fire poles be installed, what kind of traffic calming, all of that will be done at the step where we do the plat approval. And then final plat approval, and then there's a development timeline for the plat and all that.
Right.
So nothing in here takes away from that. In fact, if anything, this bolsters that and says that's the process we're gonna follow.
Right. And I think that was just to give just the voice to make sure that we're all on the same page with that process, because we do understand the process. I mean, I talked about it during our last discussion of plat approval and then going forward in the steps and just making sure that those things are in place. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, which several people have brought up to me, residents who are not here, and I didn't think of this when we talked earlier today, until I reviewed it again, was the idea of trail connectivity or access. I know that there's a section in here about $500 per lot, $10,000 up front, maximum of with regards to trails. We know that the current Summit Creek Trail system is owned by the Homeowners Association, and we appreciate that. But in addition, we know that, as we've talked about quality of life, and the PTR is represented here by Sherry, is that the citizens would like more trails, right? there's very limited space for trails because most of our residents do not have a trail easement on their property right now. And so we can't just willy-nilly say we want a trail that goes back here just because it goes through somebody's backyard. I think Summit Creek would feel the same way. But at the same time, when we're applying for grants for trails, we have to show that not only do we connect ourselves and all of our residents to a trail system, but then we have the ability to connect onto Salem's trails, and Salem can connect onto Spanish Fork trails. And so I was wondering if we could address at any point that idea of trail access and connectivity. At this point, it looks like the only possibility would be maybe down Summit Creek Drive to have a trail connectivity to the stuff that we've required Richard Nelson to put in, the church put in their little part, some of the other development that will come below Summit Creek that will be required, to get then from our current trail system down to the existing. There's going to be this break, and I'm just wondering if you have addressed that adequately on how, although most of Summit Creek will be private roads with private access, we still are part of Woodland Hills, and we want to be able to feel a community sense, and maybe a trail system would be the only option. So with that, I would like to hear from Ben first before David or Wayne.
So the way that we tried to help address the trails issue, that, like you said, the HOA owning the current trail system and any proposed future trails that we would put in Summit Creek, we kept running into the legal implications of that and the liability associated with if someone gets hurt, the HOA is liable, and how do we resolve that? And we just couldn't get past it. It was just, it was just a difficult thing to manage with our legal counsel. And so the compromise that we put into the agreement was what you read, as far as, giving the city money and also allowing them access to property that we own up on the side hill to build a different trail system that connects to the roads that exist in Woodland Hills, to try and give the city something that would allow you to have more trails in exchange or as a compromise.
I guess then with that, we know that the city does have an easement for utilities on the sides of roads. Some properties have a trail easement in place, and people who bought their lot know that that's in place. Is there any way that we might be able to negotiate a trail easement down down Summit Creek Drive on that public road?
Well, so we own Summit Creek Drive.
Right. But we don't have a trails easement. We have a utility easement on both sides of the road. And that's what I was just asking Ben, if they would consider making sure that wording is changed, that it could be a trail and or utility easement.
I understand what you're saying, but then, here's where, again, I apologize for bringing this up for the 20th time, but it depends on what you mean by trail. So if you're talking about like an asphalted bike path that goes up and down Summit Creek Drive, that's perfectly within our rights as a city to build. Okay, we own Summit Creek Drive, so even outside of the easement, because our property that is Summit Creek Drive does not end at the asphalt. We have more property, and then as you mentioned, we also have the easement. So we can't build a trail over the easement, you're right. But we do own more property to the side of that road. And so we could build a trail to the side of the road. That's up to us, and that has nothing to do with Summit Creek or the development agreement, one way or another. When we're talking about more of a wild trail or a walking trail, that's more what we ran into this conflict over the HOA owning their current walking trails versus the trails that we want to have and have connected throughout the city. And so that's where we had to make the compromise, was regarding the trail system above the water tanks in that section rather than down in Summit Creek.
Okay, so the access for a trail system in that property above the water tanks then would be, how would that trail system then be negotiated going forward?
do you want me to?
Go for it.
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Because I think we have, since we have Parks
No,
and
and I
Trails
appreciate
here,
Sherry
I think
here,
it's,
yeah.
it's important for them to hear so that they can plan their vision
Sure,
as well.
and when I'm at, C9 is actually Steve, and I think he might have some
Oh,
comments as
yes,
well.
we know Steve is
So,
here.
I'll say a few things, and Steve probably won't chime in too. So, I don't know, I can't remember the name of the road that is along the hillside, and then the water tank, and then the mountainside. Anyways, there are currently 2 city-owned, I guess, easements that kind of, one of them goes up kind of towards the water tank, and there's one further down. And then above that, we own a strip of property there that we would, offer to build a trail on, and you could use both of those to, access on the lower side and then build whatever trail you want and then come out by the water tank. The money that's part of that, $500 per permit, whatever that total ends up being would be, given to the city to use as you want. It's your money. Once it's turned over to you through that process.
Okay, so with that then, Mayor, if that money is given based on the lots for trails, would we then have a capital improvement fund that would be directly gone into, that would be directly put into instead of to the general fund to be used for anything? Because it seems to me that if it's in here based on trails, that we should make sure that's dedicated, so Park and Trails and the rest of our residents know that that was part of the, not only the development agreement, but the intent.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the meat on the bones yet.
Right.
That makes sense,
Okay.
so. Yeah, Wayne,
Park Trails Recreation, together with Janet, have been identifying city property as well as easements throughout the whole entire city.
We have them all marked on the map, big
And the
map.
idea is to look at those and see which ones would work for trail development. And to take this money then that the city would be receiving and look at how it wants to use that money to develop new trails in those areas of the city that are city-owned property. And some of those might be drainage easements, some of them are just open space areas. And so that's the goal of that, to work that into a trail system in this part of the city. Not necessarily tying into Summit Creek's trails, unless we have adjoining pieces of property where potentially that could be done. But that's a compromise that was made having to do with trails in the city.
thanks, Wayne.
That makes sense, yeah.
In listening to Ben's comments, he mentioned about 2 easements. I'm only aware of one, and that is pedestrian and water tank access only. The city does own property that goes right down to Broad Hollow. However, the person that's building the house there has put their fire hydrant, their electrical box on city property, so there is no access there anymore. And I don't think the Machado easement has gone through, so I'm not quite sure what Ben's talking about as far as access to connect trails.
We have to pull the map.
I think there's a piece of property above the Machado property that is owned by Summit Creek, and that's the one where they've giving access to that piece of property there through the development agreement. It's above.
Yeah, but there's, what I guess Sherry's saying is there's no street access to go between where Mikados are and the Summit Creek property and the city street to get
Not
up
yet.
there. Yeah.
Not yet.
We're working on it.
Okay.
All right.
Those were my questions.
Anybody else have any questions concerning the agreement? Okay, thank you, David. And thank you, Ben and Wayne.
Steve, I don't know if you have.
Oh, did Steve want to say something? He's not muted.
Sorry, I didn't mean to direct you back that way. Maybe not.
Steve, can you hear us? Ben thinks
Is
you
our
want
way
to
muted
talk.
volume down?
There.
Oh, there he is.
Show your face, Steve.
Well, I just figured enough Bens were speaking on this topic that I'm just.
Do we know if he wants to say something?
Yeah, I don't know, I just saw him.
He
unmute
dropped
himself,
off,
and so-
and he dropped off to let Bucky speak.
Okay, you
Now
can
Bucky's
continue, it's
muted.
fine.
Okay, we're fine.
He might be trying to resync.
He's probably trying to just log back in.
All right, well,
Yeah.
if you think that we've heard your side of things, then we'll
Okay,
move
here he
on.
is.
Steve,
There's
anything?
Steve.
You don't have to talk.
I know.
He kinda does now, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to
We're waiting, Steve.
It better be good.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, now we
Of course
can.
we
Okay. So sorry about that. For some reason, I was talking and everybody was just laughing at me, and I know that's normal course, but one of the things that Doral brought up and that Carrie brought up was the impact fees, right? And there are certain impact fees that the developer has to be able to rely on in order to make sure that the financial model for the development works. So that's part of the reason that it's normal and customary for the impact fees to be set at the time that the development agreement comes into play. If this agreement goes beyond the normal term of the agreement, then obviously that can change when it comes up to the time of the renewal for the agreement. But for that period of time, for the initial term, those fees are set. So we know what we're dealing with. You guys know what you're dealing with, and go from there. We don't want to end up in a situation as the developer where all of a sudden there's an impact fee that changes 8 years down the road that, you know, significantly changes or is focused solely on the development itself. So that's part of the reason that I think it's normal and customary for, you know, that fee schedule to kind of be set for the most part. That doesn't mean that the building process fees can't change, but it's just the impact fees.
The subdivision impact fee, it's
Yeah,
very.
correct.
Okay.
Thank you, David,
It
for
is
the.
strictly applying to the
Okay.
subdivision impact fees, not the individual lot building impact.
Okay, that makes
Right.
sense to me, Steve, because if this is a 10-year agreement, minimum 10-year agreement, then those fees, I would hope that those fees could still cover the cost going forward for 10 years. I don't think that we would want to bind the city in spending money out of the city coffers to help make sure that those things are completed. I mean, in the last few years, we've had to do that on several developers who didn't finish or didn't do something, and I know that might be not comparing apples to apples, but it is something that our residents have been concerned about to make sure that we're not covering the cost of any development that's being brought to us. So that's just saying it that way, so that we both understand where we're at. But I understand that that's the impact fees for subdivision, not for individual homes.
Yeah, and the other thing, Carrie, there is I think some of that goes to bonding, right?
Yes.
So and we still have, yeah, and we still have to follow all the bonding ordinances in place at that point in time. So we'll be okay.
Great, thanks.
I don't think the risk that you initially thought was there is probably as material as you may think it might be, or you did think it was.
I just think that it's good to have it addressed in the public forum, so that residents who are a little bit gun shy of development would see that we have adequately discussed it, and
Yeah.
that you have been able to answer the questions.
All right, very good. We'll move on, thank you. Item 3, creation and charter of beautification committee. Councilmember Malkovich.
Well, as you remember, last time we decided that beautification would be a subcommittee of the PTR, and that we didn't need to have a charter. What we did say we would have a charter for would be Community Watch. So Jody and I have discussed that. It was just a miscommunication on which one we were going to
Thank you,
have.
I was
And we were gonna
confused.
have, so it will be changed on the agenda for the 12th, that it will say charter for Community Watch.
Okay.
So it was just a miscommunication on what we needed to do, because I
We
thought,
already have volunteers for beautification, so
Yes.
I'm like, we're already rolling.
yes, yes.
So, and that's addressed, and we'll
Uh-huh,
reconvene on that next time. All right.
yep.
Item 4, request of Parks, Trails, and Recreation Committee to install bollards at the entrance of the switchback. I'm not even sure I pronounced that right. Bollards?
Yes, you did.
All right.
You
You were calling me out once on
Sure,
how I
yeah.
pronounced Corvallis, I think. So, I was waiting for you to pronounce.
So Mayor, what we're looking to there do is, we're wanting to restrict the trail down to vehicles 50 inches wide or less.
For
And that would be the
safety.
purpose of the bollards. For instance, when we were doing the switchback repair the other day, Janet's son was coming down the trail in his four-wheeler, and I was coming this way, and I think we had a good, it was massive amounts of leeway, you know, ½ inch to an inch, and we were able to slide past each other and go. And we were both on four-wheelers, so we were below that 50-inch minimum, and so that's what the reasoning and logic would be for that request is to make sure we're safe.
Keeps cars off.
It keeps cars off. It also keeps some side-by-sides off, just because you're gonna have to go in reverse, and there's a few spots, not a lot, but there's a few spots where that is exceptionally dangerous. And I don't know the competency of the drivers every single time, and I think this is where our safety and, you know, our responsibility as a council and yourself for the safety of our citizens just needs to make sense.
And that is becoming more and more standard. That's a standard width. That's acceptable in more and more trails and public use areas like that. And, you know, it's a liability for the city a little bit if we aren't careful with it, because it is on city property. So it's really, it's a safety issue. That's the only reason we're doing that.
Well, it's environmental too, because the larger vehicles are loading into the side of the mountain on the uphill side. And if we could do this procedurally, rather than by ordinance, we don't need a public hearing. The bollards themselves going up enforce that procedure, because one of the big moon rovers can't fit through if you put it there by Toolers where you start to go up towards the cape. They can't fit, so the bollards themselves enforce the procedure.
And there's already those posts that are, those 4x4s that are there right now, right? And I would imagine are farther apart than
They are.
50 inches. Okay.
What's the cost? And
Craig said he could build, right, we got a hand back here.
So, just from, so I have one of those Moon Rovers. Mine is 60 inches wide, and I'm used to going to trails that I can't take it on. I understand. I've never actually taken mine up the switchbacks. But what I want to make a comment of, at least so people are thinking about it, I've seen side-by-sides go up the switchbacks with medical personnel to bring people down. My unit has a big giant bed in the back of it. It seats 6 people, all kinds of stuff. If something like that were to happen, it has happened up the trail, and we needed a machine, and I know other people on search and rescue have the same machine that I do, it could limit some of our ability to get up there. Now, you know, Craig might disagree with me, but this is my personal opinion. I don't have any desire to drive my machine up there. I don't want to get yelled at by any of my neighbors at all. So, but I think about if I went up there and I can grab my go bag and go up there, if somebody was in an emergency, how do I do that?
The bollards can be removable. It would cost more, but we could have one of them be removable that would allow an emergency vehicle to go through.
I have seen that on other trails where they can be removed for emergencies, so I think that would, yeah, maybe you can let us know what the cost of that will be.
Okay, we'll talk with Craig and see, because he's told me
Wayne's
about
got his
it.
hand up.
Yes.
I think we're getting the cart before the horse here a little bit. I would think that's a land use issue, and when we start restricting the use of that land, whether it's through bollards or any other means, I think we're to try to do it what we're calling procedurally. I'm not sure that's a correct process. If there's an ordinance that needs to be reviewed and passed and have public comment on, this 50-inch thing, it will literally probably remove half of the UTVs. Doral can't take his up there.
I'm 50 inch.
You're 50 inch.
Is it?
Is it?
Yeah.
And it would actually be like 52,
But
so
I
the
know,
50
I know
kids.
families in the city that might be in that predicament.
Anyway.
Is that
I think
considered land
There's other
use?
things that we need to look at before a decision is made on whether we should go forward with that process or not.
Is it land use when it's safety oriented? Is it
Sure.
still
Oh, sure.
considered that?
Now, whether this is land use or not, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
It
Is it
doesn't
truly
matter.
land use?
I know a lot, as I did a lot of research on this, and Wayne, you can correct me here, but a lot of this is when I look at other cities, they are non-ordinances.
Right.
And they are just guidelines on the website, rules and guidelines there. The only reason they never put them as ordinances was for enforcement. So if there was a fee schedule associated with violation, that's when they needed an ordinance in place for that.
But do they have the actual physical barriers? Because that would, if they're guidelines, that's one thing, but if there's physical barriers, whether there's an ordinance or
That is a
not,
great
that's
question.
an enforcement.
I know, like, I looked at Salem, I looked at, another of those, and I know, like, the River Trail, they've got bollards
Everywhere.
all over their trails. You've probably ridden on them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I don't know, though, I
But they
didn't
have
put a
an
correlate
ordinance
there
for it.
between if it is an ordinance on that particular site that I looked at. I
Well,
looked at way too many sites.
And Brad Krokfolk, he's on our committee, and he has one vehicle. He said, if we do this, he said, he's a big ATV or off-roader, and one of his vehicles, he won't be able to take on the switchbacks anymore, but he also said that he agrees that it's the best width for safety and that it is the standard.
But I do think, especially with it being as volatile an issue as it is, the switchbacks are a sacred cow to a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons, so. If we have to err in one direction, I do think that we should probably treat it as a land use issue. Or at least explore whether
If
it
it's an
is,
ordinance.
yeah.
Well, and that's the difference,
Well,
like
but,
what Ben was saying, is it an ordinance, because that would be a land use issue, this would be an ordinance to have those, or would it fall under something else of having them, because
I'd be happy to work with
Yeah.
Wayne.
Yeah, I think that we
should
should
figure
tease
that
that
out.
out a little bit, just to make sure, just because, for some things it might not be that critical, but for some.
Well, and to be
things
clear, I don't wanna limit the use on the switchbacks, but I also don't want, anything tragic to happen up there and for the city to be liable for it. So it's a fine, cause I would like to just leave the switchbacks alone personally, but it's a safety issue and a liability issue for the city.
How many rescues have we had to do on the switchback?
Yeah, but we've got
through the years with cars up there,
here's the thing though, we have a lot of new people moving in that are shooting off fireworks and doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing.
No, I don't
And
disagree
that's
with you.
my
I'm just
concern.
saying,
Not
I've been
residents who
here
use the
22
trail.
years and there's never been any issue on the switchbacks.
I don't remember one, that's correct.
are you talking about medical issues or other issues?
I have no recollection of any 911 calls for the switchback.
I'm just
Because they're
saying.
scared out of their wits.
With non-911.
Yeah, non-911.
People calling members on the department who've gone up and done that.
And how many times have we seen cars with high school kids that are wanting just to go and have a fun little picnic up there?
Fires at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's true.
No doubt that I
They're not
support
gonna call 911.
the effort, I just wanna make sure
Yeah.
that we,
Well, the land use, we need to make sure it's legal,
yeah,
so
I think that's,
we'll explore that.
okay,
I
alright.
guess it's where do we go from here? I believe John Wallace made a presentation on PTR's recommendation and why we were recommending certain things. And again, it's where do we go from there?
So I think
Go to Ben.
I'll talk with Wayne,
Okay.
and with the ordinance that I've drafted, that we've been kicking around within the PTR, I've already told Wayne that I'll be getting it to him for his opinion as well, which I think we're now at that point. Now we need to also talk land use, and then you and I can take it from there, and then if it's a land use decision, then it'll be headed to the planning commission, right? You'll need to have a public hearing, then we'll need to have one here to then decide whether we vote that into ordinance or not. So, our next step is
Ordinance
meeting
or
with Wayne.
procedure, whichever way
Right.
we're gonna go.
Correct, yep.
And that's why we brought it up tonight, because we were trying to decide if we could do it procedurally or if it needed to be an ordinance. That's why we're discussing it tonight.
And does the city council have to vote on a procedure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Not really. It depends on how hot of an issue it will be.
It's hot.
I believe it will be. But that's all the more reason to have the public hearing.
yeah.
Right.
To actually open it up. and
So
get-
people need to know about it, and they need to show up when we have one.
Yes.
Because then we can hear what people, it's important that we hear how they feel about it.
Yes.
Okay, item 5, formal indemnification request from Corbett Stevens, Public Works Director. So the city was served recently with effectively a lawsuit, and Corbett was also named as a party, and we recently passed. But I'm struggling to remember the ordinance number that we passed, but we did pass the ordinance, and then we actually have a contractual obligation to indemnify Corbett. So, we did get, Maurice did, and I can see that Maurice is here online. Maurice did send an email. He has expressed his opposition to this. Any comment or discussion on that?
Did Maurice want to express his, and is that why he's here?
I was gonna open it up to each of you, and then if Maurice wants to, I've seen his comments.
Did the ordinance already take care, did it already take care of this? basically?
Yeah, it's just, it's not, we're just formalizing the exercise. So it's something that we are already bound to do by virtue of the ordinance and by virtue of our contract.
And that indemnification we voted on recently.
We did.
And it was for all city employees,
And
our
volunteers.
firefighters and people that
Volunteer.
that need protection to volunteer, really.
And just for the people that are listening or that hear, but it was, if you're just doing your ordinary course of duty job and you're not doing anything malicious or.
Yeah,
Or
if you do,
criminal.
if you do
Or
something,
criminal.
something illegal, you are not indemnified.
So it's not like we can
And that's in
do
the
whatever we
ordinance.
want.
Yeah, not a free pass, so govern yourself accordingly.
It'll be done.
Yeah.
All right, Maurice, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I would. I sent in a statement that I would like to put into the record, and I would also just like to voice my concern about indemnifying an individual that, in my opinion, has been very abusive to us, who has, through the ombudsman report and also the Fuji lawsuit, has acted illegally. I'm very concerned about indemnifying this individual in essence, protecting him from the abusive conduct that he has exhibited in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Would you ask for that and think he's been reviewed? Because he's been reviewed by his licensing.
By Doppel.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking evidence, I mean, there's plenty of evidence to support the fact that Corbett has done his job the way he is supposed to do his job. So, but, I mean, there's a forum for that, but as far as our discussion and our purpose here tonight, it's just to put it to you to formally offer that to Corbett.
Fully in support of doing that, so.
Okay. Without any other comment, we'll move on from there. Item 6, April 2022 financials and check disbursements. Is Chris on, Jody?
I don't see him on.
Uh-oh.
See, I'm
Well-
trying to look.
I read them, I looked through them all.
Well, if people have questions, I might have to wait until Chris is able, because I can talk high level, but as far as specific.
I didn't have any questions, I saw our retreat on there.
Yeah.
Jody answered all mine, so.
Yeah, all my questions were answered.
Okay, and is that also the case for May 2022?
There wasn't anything extraordinary on them, except for, a couple of our utility bills that were huge, I was surprised.
Well, I work in my office with my lights off, so I don't know what more you want.
Well, Water.
turn the computer off. I want it all handwritten.
Water.
Yeah.
No more potty breaks, yeah.
Right, maybe just don't flush.
Well, a lot of it's water.
Okay.
The increase in water usage will drive our electricity costs up a lot.
Yeah,
Okay,
that was what I was surprised by, was how high they were.
all right, well, thank you for paying close attention.
SESD getting their bit.
Don't start with me. All right, item A, proposed ordinance creating a fee schedule for misdemeanor violations of the city to be included as part of the city fee schedule. And Deputy Dudson, you had agreed to give us some context for this, if you would.
So we've talked about this in the past where we've been trying to get some of the Woodland Hills ordinances to go through what's called the state court system, so that when we write a citation that we can actually have that pull up under our citations. And with doing that, the state required that there be a fee schedule with that, and a class, which is like a class C, B, A misdemeanor or an infraction that has to go with it. And so we just have a handful of ordinances that we're trying to push through: open fire, fireworks, shooting a weapon in city limits, shooting a firearm, and curfew are those that we're pushing through right now.
And parking on the road.
Oh, and parking. How did I forget that one? Parking.
We have curfew, open fire, shooting, fireworks, discharging firearms, snow removal, parking, and parking on city roads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask questions? Is that legal?
yeah.
I look at this and maybe it's my ignorance on law. A class B is worse than a class C?
Yes.
So, I guess for me, as I look at the bottom, the maximum, right? Class B misdemeanor, maximum $1,000 fine, and potentially 6 months in jail. And then a class C misdemeanor is $750 and 90 days in jail. Now, I don't know if this is just a classification issue or what. I see like a class B misdemeanor parking on city roads is
Worse than starting a fire?
And myself and Jody talked about this. This is what was already in your city ordinances, and to change those, I believe we have to do a
Public hearing.
public hearing, so those can be changed.
And we can have that on our next agenda so that we can switch.
I
At
would
least
love-
open fires and fireworks should be class B.
Okay, but let me just say, I'm talking to Craig North, that he did strongly recommend that we adopt it, and then if we need to tweak it.
Right,
but
of course.
Right now,
I'm
we've
cool with
got
that.
some real
I
challenges
just-
with enforcement, so.
No, I'm 100% okay with that. I just thought,
No, I totally agree. Myself and Jody talked about that today. It was
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
we're on the same page.
I would suggest that we adopt this and then we move forward on our next meeting and have a public hearing to move at least open fires and fireworks to class B.
And just so you know,
As an ordinance change.
with the fee schedule on that, looking at Elk Ridge City, like open fire or fireworks, theirs is $1,000 fine, mandatory court.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and
see,
just so you guys
shooting
know
weapons,
that,
you have people that are trying to hunt inside city limits,
Right.
so.
Discharging of a firearm is a class B. Shooting a weapon could be your bow and arrow, right? But we still have people hunting in town. So it's other weapons that are considered, and
Believe me, I've considered it.
yeah.
and then just so you guys,
I got enough deer.
and just so you're aware, when someone does go to court and that fine is $1,000, that judge has the power to decrease that fine to $100 or whatever they feel is appropriate due to the situation.
So if we pass this tonight, can we change the fee before we pass this? I would prefer to not have the minimums we do on fire and fireworks.
So,
And
right now, our minimum is nothing. Well, right? We don't have anything.
$50 on this.
Actually,
So
no.
we talked about it because the class C is the max is $750. So an open fire and fireworks would be a $750 fine.
At the start, the first infraction.
Correct.
That's
Well,
not what the
we,
chart showed.
We revised
Yeah,
it
we
quickly and I
revised it.
sent it out to you
Oh,
guys,
good.
around.
Oh, good.
So
We
did-
did, it's right here.
so the way Elk Ridge City, we kind of adapt what they kind of had set up, but like open
Oh,
fire and
love it.
fireworks, it is mandatory court. There is no first offense, second offense, third. It automatically just goes to $750.
Right.
Well,
And if they continue to do it, as it goes through the court systems, the judge can make a harsher.
The judge can see that it's a repeat offender or whatever,
Yes.
right? So I think that's important for us to notice too, is that if it's, the judge has the ability, so when we address this on our July 12th meeting, then, and if we propose a change, if it can be on our agenda to propose the change that night after the public hearing earlier in the day, in the evening, then we can not just move it to a class B, but we can add that language that says "and court," is what you were saying, not just the fine, but and it will go before the court.
Yeah, it'll be a mandatory court appearance.
Okay, so we just have to remember that we need to include that language.
Does the city get the revenue from the fine or the county?
It does not, because they use the county justice court, it's those fees pay for the judge, the court clerk, the building, and everything that goes with that.
so if there is damage also assessed with this, they start a section of the city on fire, for instance, is that a fee that would then also be assessed to them?
Now that would, as they go through the court proceedings, the judge would look at a restitution fee.
Gotcha.
And that would come
That
to
would
us.
come to the city.
That, yeah, so they'd have to either make payments or however the courts decide that
Gotcha.
is addressed. So that's like any property damage, someone goes up to someone's fence and hits it or throws a rock and it causes damage, it's through the court proceedings that
So there's a fine and restitution.
yeah, the victims can say, hey, who's gonna pay for this? And usually the courts will work something out.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like the new fees, thank you, Jody.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we're getting closer.
Not a moment too soon.
Yeah, no kidding. This weekend.
Yeah.
Well, that's why Sherry wanted the,
Okay, proposed resolution amending the city fee schedule, increasing the monthly sewer fee passed by the Payson City Council. Ben, is that you?
Technically, rates are going up. Now, Corbett and I are working to try and, Corbett's working and I'm supporting him, to get that decreased by us taking on part of that fee. That would be inspection and cleaning. Corbett and I met with a sonar company that does this, and so we'll be able to see, and we'll do 3 years of intensive study, which will then find the patterns of where our pinch points are in our sewer system. Then it'll be like once a year, once every 3 years, once every 5 years, as we learn where those things are. And because of the way the sonar works, instead of a camera, the sonar will then help us quickly identify and drastically decrease the cost, and will then only have to clean those little areas, instead of when you scope it, you just have to do the whole system. And so it'll drastically decrease our costs with this proposed solution from Corbett.
Now,
And so it should be pretty
is
good.
Payson okay with that?
We are working with them, they have said yes. Their city council though approved this fee increase, so we get the wonderful privilege of
I know.
accepting that.
To pass along.
So, so we had it as a pass-through fee, whatever Payson says, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And so that's what we are adopting tonight, because they have chosen to increase and we use their system. So
Correct.
what you're saying is going forward, we're going to try to see if we can negotiate something where we can decrease our resident fees by doing some of the work ourselves.
So it'll spike for a little bit until we can work with Payson to then get it back down.
Well,
So,
because part of
yeah.
those fees are,
Maintenance.
Payson's responsible right now
Correct.
for the maintenance of the entire pipeline.
And that's what we're trying to pull off of their plate.
Right, so, but that would require a contractual change with Payson.
Correct. Yep, and that's the part that's slowing us down, and just to see if they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Because they've gotta look at, they built the facility with certain financials, and they need to make sure that they can continue, so on and so forth.
And turning maintenance over to us presents some potential liabilities too, I would assume.
No,
Wouldn't it?
not necessarily. It would for us. We would take the liabilities they currently hold.
No, I think it's up to them.
But, I mean,
Whatever we do or don't do flows into their system. So-
Yes, there's always those types of risks, though we incur any potential issues there. So yes, it is a risk, but we also have to prove per contractual obligation that we have hit our contractual obligation. Right, so.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
Can we just note that that increase is 35% of what,
Oh, yeah,
that's what we passed over, so.
thank you.
That's large.
Thank
And
you.
and that will continue no matter how many people, join, unless we change some things.
Which is why.
Because it seems like the more people they have on, then they would be able to lower some of those fees, because it's not just us, it's people in the county, it's people in Elbridge, it's all the way in the whole line of the system.
Yes, one of
All
the
that
biggest
building
problems with Woodland Hills is they anticipated more people would be connected by now than are. So they're currently upside down with their Woodland Hills contract. And that's why they are so frustrated. And hence, we've had to get involved and start getting creative before they just ratchet it up.
Those darn septic tank people.
Well, it's not the septic tank people because we can't connect to the sewer. It's homes that are currently over in that area where the sewer line runs.
That
Yeah.
didn't connect, and we gave them the choice of connect or not, and a lot of them did not, and maybe that was.
Well, and it's a little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for us. You can force them to, and that helps in the long run and hurts them financially. And so it's frankly, it's politics. So we made a decision, they made their decisions, and now we get to reap the consequences.
All right, thank you. Okay, department and council updates. Deputy Dudson, we have you for a sheriff's office report. Anything further to add than the fines?
Never, no. Did you want to review the contract, or is that on the?
That's on here.
is it
That's
on
not
the-
on the work session,
Yeah, that,
but it's on
I
the
didn't-
vote.
Yeah, okay.
So I have it on the work session, on
Yeah,
the,
number 10.
yeah, number 10 on
Oh, it's just not on the printout.
It's not on the printout you put on our desk.
It's fine.
Okay, but it is on,
let me make sure.
Paper's so last century.
Well, but to go
Yes,
back
it's
60
on there.
pages
It's
to
on,
get to the
okay.
first
The
page.
website is
I don't
on
wanna
the
do
state
that.
website.
because we
It's on my
really
other desk, I'll make
wanted
you
to
know.
make sure that we had this ready to vote on at this
Yeah.
meeting.
So let's
so.
let's talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, so actually, I mean, we had some concerns, when reviewing the agreement, but we worked with the sheriff's office and the county attorney and our city attorneys, and I mean, our concerns were all satisfactorily resolved, and we got it, I guess, when was it? It was finalized yesterday, so I think,
And it'll go before the county commissioners tomorrow.
Yeah.
For them to finalize it, and once that's finalized, then I'll bring it back to you to sign as mayor.
yeah. And so, I mean, it is something that time is of the essence, because our current contract expires the end of this month, so we do want to make sure that that's.
That the service continues.
Definitely.
So.
Okay,
Well,
any
I
comments?
appreciate all the work that went into getting this done. I know one of the main concerns in the entire state for every city is law enforcement. There is a, it's hard to be able to maintain law enforcement. Retention is really on the downside, and other cities are taking a lot of the deputies away from the sheriff's department, and I just want to publicly say how much we appreciate what you do, Deputy Dudson. I know you go above and beyond in our city, and we appreciate that, And of course, the sheriff has always been attentive to our needs and what we're doing, whether it's in the middle of a disaster or our everyday events. He and I were on the phone quite a bit this weekend about a potential threat, and it's nice to be able to have that connectivity right away in a matter of minutes. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And on that law enforcement thing, we just had, so we're down like 6 patrol deputies right now, and we just had a testing last week where we had over 100 applicants apply. Only 11 showed up.
Wow.
They're just applying because they want to see.
So there's just the cities. There is a battle with pay and benefits right now.
They're stealing from city to city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just a big shocker for us. So
Yeah.
they'll retest again at the end of this month.
Just realize if you go, Jack stays.
Oh yeah.
Can we get an amendment on the contract that
Yeah.
requires and locks Stetson down?
There we go. That did come up, but now that you mention it, maybe let's not vote.
I would like.
Maybe we could call the
permanent.
commissioners tonight, let them know that we want that included tomorrow in their vote. But yeah, thank you, and thank you for providing us the numbers. We do put those out in our monthly, on our every time we have a newsletter, that those stats go out, and I think our residents, I've gotten positive feedback by that, just knowing that there's a presence in our city, helps, that everyone feels safe and secure. So.
And I try to put a safety tip in that newsletter, so if there's
I like that.
any topic, because I'm like, okay, what else can we talk about? Feel free, residents, if you want to give Carrie, and she can kind of let me know what topics we want to address. So.
We're going into fireworks season. So.
Yep,
Yeah,
we're having a lot
yeah,
this
fun.
next one on fireworks.
I never leave town on the 4th because I'm always nervous.
All right,
Okay,
thank you. All right, Corbett is on a well-deserved vacation, so nothing from Public Works. Councilman Hilliard, Public Works.
Nothing
Roads.
on roads either. We haven't met.
Okay. Councilmember Kinnison, Public Safety.
I'll try and go fast. I just want to give a shout out for the Department of Natural Resources. Someone had a deer crawl under their porch area and die, and they made a call to DNR, and they got there almost before I did. They were very quick to respond, less than an hour. And so they came, they carried the animal out and put it in the back of their truck and took it away. He just pointed out that some of the fawns, as always, don't get a good enough start, and this was just a young deer that didn't make it. But I was impressed by their service. Thanks to Ben over in Summit Creek, he gave me the costs they pay for their security. If we were interested in contracting for security services in our city, those costs are available, and I have them, at least their particular contract with them, and it gives us an idea of what it might take if we're interested in more of that. I do want to mention something really quick. We created a plan for our city based on the information we learned from the fire professionals over in Colorado. And Craig and I submitted a plan at our return in a very timely manner. There was a deadline for that to go back. So we sent a plan to them, and I want to tell the city the 3 areas that we've set as goals to accomplish in our city. Number 1 is we want to do a curbside defensible space assessment of every property in Woodland Hills. We're going to do this without disturbing the citizens, but we will go to the front of their property, stay on city property, and look and see what we can see and give the best judgment we can as to they are prepared or it needs work. And then we'll give that information to each homeowner privately. We just feel like that's what cities are doing in the urban interface like us, and it's important that we do that. And we have a goal of doing that this year, so citizens can look for that. We will be using our firefighters, and we'll have a strict, a precise form that each will use to make sure all properties are judged the same. But we do wanna let citizens know that there may be problems that they might want to work on.
You're welcome to come down my property.
We appreciate that. We just wanna do.
You can't see it from the city.
Right. Well, we think it's important and it's what's being done, so. So we'll, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Enter at your own risk.
That's Ted's sign.
So there's a lot
Yeah,
more detail, there's a lot more detail going into the plan, which I'm not gonna bore you with, but number 2 is we would like to improve our roads as fire breaks. So we will, with the city easements, we are just gonna attempt to widen the roads. That's our only hope of stopping a fire, are the road breaks, and we need to do more to
In the
widen
past,
the
they've
roads some.
trimmed the trees sometimes when they hang over the road. Are you guys gonna do that again?
That's what I wanna do, yeah, that's what we have in our plan, and so you'll hear more about that as we develop that. And the third thing, and with Carrie's help, we're going to perform a citywide evacuation practice run. And we'd like to do that next year, next spring. Believe it or not, the way we evacuated at our last fire is not how a normal evacuation is ran. When we evacuate on a fire within our city, it is get the heck out of town and don't take anything with you. It's gonna happen so fast for your life to be saved, you'll have to get out of town. We hope to practice that so people are well aware of how to evacuate and where we go and we just wanna run through that.
And I mean, that was actually kind of an interesting evacuation too, because, you know, initially we'd been told that Foothills Elementary was the evacuation spot. And then the high school became the evacuation spot.
And then we got kicked out of
Yeah.
there. Eventually.
We'll give you all those details as we research them and prepare for this, but.
We were homeless, so.
But
We've got high school.
there are a growing number of evacuations carried out by cities all across this nation with the drying seasons and so on, and we just need to be better.
We've been talking
prepared.
about that as emergency managers in the county, about different evacuation plans and where to go, because there is, concern, the largest locations happen to be churches and schools. But like what we had before, Foothill became part of the area that was then deemed susceptible, so it had to be moved, but it was far enough away to the high school where most of the kids at the high school were not impacted, so they still had school. So that's something to be working on with the school districts and or churches that are large enough to hold a large capacity. And so some of those interlocal agreements that we have, or the MOUs that we have with those entities, are part of the evacuation plan and things that we can address.
You might think out of the box on this one.
The ballpark,
We may
what about the ballpark?
we may evacuate to a pasture. I mean,
Right.
we're
Right,
thinking
depending
get
on
out
where
of
it
town
is.
for
Of course,
life.
we're getting less and less pastures as we go south. I mean,
Yeah.
not south, north,
So-
northwest.
So help us on that plan, Jerry,
Yes.
as we develop that. The last thing I'll mention is we will be patrolling the city for the 4th of July weekend, starting Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We'll have crews out watching for fireworks.
Friday as well, Doro.
That's right, thank you.
Yeah, first, second,
We're
third,
inviting
fourth.
the city council, we could use some extra people.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
And Monday. So we have some seats available. We'd love
Yeah,
you guys to
and you're
join us.
welcome to ride with us.
So who do we call if we see them?
911.
911.
Yeah.
I'll also be out Sunday night and Monday night.
Excellent, excellent, that's great news. Bring Jack.
Oh, yes.
Mayor, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Will.
That was a great report.
All right, Councilmember Lunt, city events, volunteers, parks, trails, and recreation.
I don't think, do we have any city events between now and Woodland Hills Days? I don't think that we do. So we're going forward on that. People that we've asked so far, we've gotten good response. Volunteers have been great. And the things that we've had so far this year that I've been over, volunteers was the thing that scared me the most, was getting people to volunteer. And we haven't had huge crowds, but we've always had enough. And for that, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that people are willing to serve. So Woodland Hills Days is going good, and we just booked the band tonight for Friday night, the same one that we had last year that was in the park that played. So we just got them
I was
booked
out of town,
tonight.
but,
Yeah, they were really good, and it was just kind of added a little bit of ambiance while everyone had dinner, and so we just got them booked. I got a text while we were sitting here.
Great.
They were good.
They were good, so you approve?
I like it. yeah.
Okay, because it was proposed that we could get a bigger band, but it would cost more money, so I opted for the smaller one. And then Parks, Trails, and Recreation, we are working on the map. That's the biggest thing. We worked on that in our last session, and then I had my, because I'm in title, I had my team, I just told Sherry, I had my team one day, we actually spent 8 hours one day, and we went through every single plat, and we put it on, we've got a master, because I'm a nerd, I know these things, but there's like a mapper at the county, and you can get a huge map, and you can put whatever filters you want on it, and so I have this huge 4x3 foot map of the city with certain filters on it, and then we're marking it up, and I have 2, so we have a rough draft, and then we'll like transfer it to a final, but that tomorrow we're meeting at Sherry's house, and we're gonna go over it and look to see if we can identify any places for additional trails. Now that it's all marked up, we can see, some people have horse trail easements. There's 3 properties, I think, that have a horse trail easement on their property. And a weird one by Sherry's, there's a trail easement on the front of the properties that goes down, so.
I'm gonna have to take a look at, see what is allowed online.
Now I gotta buy a horse.
No, you're good.
I'm good? Oh, except that's where the flood goes, I know that.
There
that
were,
drainage is,
most of the
backyard.
easements that we identified are drainage easements. There were very few trail easements.
Right, very few, and we
Very
can't
few.
put trails on drainage easements.
No.
Nope.
Well, there's a
Some-
couple that are both though.
Right.
But then there's also some that it's really interesting because it's, you can tell it's a ravine and it's both. And it goes almost all the way, but then there's like 2 properties that it doesn't go all the way through. That it's blocked off, so you can't put anything, you can't put a trail through there because.
Unless you bought up the easements on the 2 properties
Yeah.
below, which is a possibility.
Yeah, so, anyway, so we're working on that tomorrow, so that's what we're working on right now, and then trying to get the ordinance approved for the trail written up and come to we have an agreement as a committee, but just making sure it's within guidelines. So, that's all I got.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Pratt. Water
Milkridge.
and,
What about Milkridge?
oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Councilmember Milkridge. Communication, sorry.
Okay, communications. Yes, as with all committees, where the volunteers are working on our committees. And so that is the same with communication. It's a very small committee. If anyone ever wants to help or understands MailChimp, you're welcome to volunteer your time on our committee. With that being said, we've tried to have a weekly newsletter, but if the volunteers are out of town or otherwise sick or something, then we can't send it out. And so we decided in May that for the summer months, because so many people were going to be gone for a variety of reasons, that we would only have one a month. So we had one the first week of June, we will have one that goes out this next week, and then one the first week of August to cover our summer months. So if any of you have something in particular that you would like to be put in the summer newsletters, let me know. Craig will be giving me quite a bit for this newsletter with regards to fireworks. Janet, I assume you'll have some things written up at least for our August newsletter, and then getting ready for Woodland Hills Day, and then by the time the 1st of August, 1st of September, we'll be back to weekly, and so we'll be able to help a lot with those communications. Also, just wanted, it's not on here, but it's my community things, is the Community Watch, so that I said earlier, we're going to have that group submit their charter and basic members going forward, and I think that I would like to work with Deputy that's in on that, so that our Neighborhood Watch Committee has a liaison with your office, so that we'll know which things need to call an officer to the scene, and which maybe some of our residents can help with. Like if someone's in Doral's backyard walking around in the night thinking they're in the woods, teenagers having a party, maybe our Neighborhood Watch can come and say, you know what, private property, get off, right? Which might not necessarily need a deputy's assistance, but would still be effective. So we want to work with you to make sure that that's going on. And then with emergency management, we continue to learn from other cities and get, hopefully we'll be able to get some grants. And then again, this, what Doro reported on is the citywide evacuation drill as part of our plan.
That's awesome.
Thank you. And I apologize again for the oversight.
We're just thinking ahead.
Well, yeah,
It's all right.
trying to, what time is it? It's gotta be pushing 9, right?
It is.
22.
Yeah. Councilmember Pratt.
I don't have anything.
Nothing more? Okay, thank you.
I mean, I got the
And then personnel, I don't have anything other than, I mean, everyone wears a lot of hats and we're just trying to advance all our respective responsibilities, but just trying to plod through all the various things that we have, so nothing beyond that.
The mayor did go above and beyond on Sunday. I was coming down Summit Creek going to church, and he's walking up, and he kind of gave me the look like, don't ask me, and he just kept walking. There was a great big rock in the middle of the road, and he went to pick it up right as my 18-year-old son ran over it and hit it, and it shot the rock at the
Yeah,
mayor.
he tiddlywink the rock.
But the mayor was going above and beyond. I just want you all to know. He was walking up Summit Creek trying to get the rock.
So,
My
thank you.
teenage son almost killed him.
Yeah, no, he did the work for me, I didn't have to hit the rock.
He almost says it's a life.
You have a tire.
It's a risk being mayor.
Yeah, no, I gotta watch those rocks. All right, possible items for upcoming city council agendas.
I just had the two. The one was the public hearing for the change from C to B on fire and fireworks, and the second was the charter for the community watch. Those were the two I wanted on both work session and regular council agenda.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I hesitate asking this, but it's important. We had firefighters on 3 separate occasions volunteer to finish the chipping, and the county did a darn good job chipping a lot of things, but when they came to a big pile, it was very hard to do. They left it. And so our crews spent a lot of hours out chipping big piles, and we need to think about maybe a budget to consider at least paying these volunteers in that circumstance.
The chief told me part of that was because they were mechanically stacked, which we asked people not to have that, but there were people who paid others to come and cut and stack, and so if it was mechanically stacked, it was too hard to separate, so the county just said, it's too big, it's stacked, we're passing it by, and so our volunteers have to come back and do that.
And without regard to that, even had there was so much pulled out for chipping that we love, that they just didn't have time to finish it, and so we would have had to do it anyway. There was just so much, and so when county worked their 2 weeks, they couldn't work anymore, and so it was given to us to finish. And I just would like to discuss in some meeting about the possibilities of, and the firefighters aren't asking for this, it's all yours truly that's saying we should consider, that's hard work, and it's above and beyond what they already volunteered to do, in my opinion. And
Some kind of bonus
we
or
gotta
something.
talk about that, just to save our volunteers.
Yeah, no,
Some of them almost didn't want to come to training when they found out what training was. It was running a chipper. Yeah, pulling piles apart. Hard work, but.
Okay, well, if you wanna bring it up next meeting, we can, or if you just wanna talk in a private context, we can do that,
Okay,
whatever you
okay.
prefer.
Thanks.
I can talk to Wayne.
Okay.
Mayor, the only thing I'd say is we've heard from a couple, our sisters here who aren't getting the communication,
Yeah.
And so I'd just love to see if we couldn't talk about a process or policy by which people can find out, am I on lists? Am I signed up for the right things that I think I am? Or just so that everybody gets the information that they want to have.
Didn't the process change a while ago and you had to go into the website and register for it, right?
No, for Everbridge, it was an opt-in, so at one point in time, we had almost every citizen, every home had at least one person on Everbridge to get all of our city notifications. Well, we started it with it just being emergency notifications and for special events, oh, Santa's coming and Woodland Hills Day, right? Just special events and emergencies only. Then, a couple of years ago, Mayor Prey decided that that would be a really great way, following Eagle Mountain's example, to put all city announcements on there. And so everybody got inundated with every single, because it's not just city council agendas that had to go out, it was the Parks and Trails Committee agenda and the financial committee and all of our different committees. So they were getting inundated with so much information that then they opted out, which opted out from everything. So we're trying to figure out, how do we still provide people with the opportunity to get what they want, but not get all of it. And when you push agendas, it was city council agendas and everybody else's agendas.
And let's remind that Peter Quitner over at the county said, no, that's not what the system's for.
It was meant for just emergency.
It's for emergencies only, stop.
Or special
Please
announcement.
stop.
He says it's okay, so, yeah, they requested, the county requested that we change that. And so now we've got to come up with another way of allowing people to see what's there. At the bottom of the newsletter, every time I have a section for public hearing notices with the link right to the agenda of that notice, as well as all of our city council meetings, the past ones and the upcoming ones with the Zoom. And try hard to put it out there, but I know it's really difficult because we don't have a newspaper or something that's real regular that people look to. So any suggestions on that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so we can bring that up next meeting and brainstorm.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, then let's take a break.
Just a 5-minute stretch?
Yeah, everyone do what you need to do until 8:52, and then we'll put this baby to bed.
Another beautiful quilt.
Now it is perfect. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Pratt, if you would lead us in the pledge, and then Councilmember Kinnison, if you will offer a prayer.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this evening to meet as the city council, and we pray that thy spirit will be with us, that we will make decisions that are good for our city. We are grateful for the citizens we represent, and we pray that we will search out solutions that will benefit all. We are grateful for the opportunity we have to serve with each other in this council, and we pray that thy spirit will guide us in our actions and in the words we use, and that we can solve the challenges before us. We are grateful to live in this beautiful place that thou hast created. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay. Public comment.
Ben, September 10th.
The thumbs up from Steve, I think, needs a hands up, actually.
Okay. All right, so let's try to contain it as much as we can. I don't think there will be any issues, but Steve, C9, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be as contentious as humanly possible. So
That'll be a nice
I figured you had
cherry on
90
top.
minutes of that earlier, so no, I think we've all had our fill. So the only thing I wanted to do is just clarify one question that was brought up by Councilmember Lunt as it related to Section 2.9 of the development agreement. That section, just to be clear, and Dave gave a great explanation, but it wasn't necessarily on this section that she had brought up. So I want to just read it real quickly. To the extent that the developer is required by the city to construct improvements of any kind outside of the project or to oversize improvements beyond the needs of the project within the project, developers shall receive reimbursement. So it's only at the requirements of the city, and they have to be oversized and outside of what would normally be in the normal course of business. So just a little bit of clarification there. I just want to make sure that we had that. So
can I use the example, Steve?
Yep.
So if, for instance,
I get it.
Okay.
I mean, you can, go ahead.
Okay. Now, if the city demanded that they build a large stormwater retention basin that was outside of their project, that didn't have anything to do with their project, but we just wanted it, then the city would reimburse them for that.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure that it was pre-approved, something that was pre-approved. I'm like always making sure, you know, we're not
on the hook,
liable for money.
yeah, no, I can tell you, Dave and Wayne did a really good job of protecting the city on that. So
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
and then one just slight clarification. If and when this comes to a vote, I don't know whether the motion needs to tie in the prior ordinance that has been previously approved related to the vacating of the roads. So I guess that's a question that I would ask Jody to clarify before someone makes a motion on that.
22-12 on the vacating of the roads, that was contingent on this being approved.
Right.
Yeah. Just making sure it's in language of, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it said it was contingent upon this, and
Yes.
once that is approved, then this would go into effect.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if any further action needs to be done in terms of the motion on this. but-
Yeah. It was just a matter of clarification. I just want to make sure that we were clear on what needed to happen or didn't need to happen. So,
No.
okay, thank you.
Great point. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Wayne, you had something.
When Bob Otley was still on the council, he had an assignment, and I understand he started to work with Randy Larson on it to do a deer study in the city to see what the deer population was, whether it was overpopulated or not. If it was, what were some of the alternatives or remedies? I don't know that that assignment was made to any of the other council persons to follow up with. Okay, Janet.
I'll take, no, I haven't, but I will take it.
Okay.
I'm actually friends with Randy, so that would be
Alright.
easy.
Okay, thank you. A second thing that I wanted to mention was my view of Corbett differs, and I want to go on the record with it, different from that expressed tonight, and I know others have some opposing view as well as Corbett, or as well as others. I've worked with Corbett for many years now, and very closely with him for the last number of years as we've worked on planning commission things as well as site plans and site plan reviews. And I just want to express a thought that that Corbett goes outside constantly to benefit the city with things that he's involved in, that he's working with. If he can save the city a dime, he'll do it on things. Everybody's entitled to have a bad day here and there, even Corbett. And I've stopped betting with him because I know that he's going to be right most of the time. And I think he stopped counting the number of burgers that I owe him in the process. But I have the highest respect for him and for his abilities and for his knowledge and his things that he brings to the table as he is our public works director here in the city. You talk about in law enforcement, we talk about somebody having your six, and the same in military, and that's somebody's got your back. And if there's somebody that I was going to be in a foxhole with, it would be Corbett, because I know that he would be there and giving his all in everything that he does. in all of the complaints that have been made against him in the, in our residential dispute with the Adams and the Fuges, there has not been one that has been founded as it's gone into district court. So a lot of what has happened centers on Corbett and his actions, and in each instance, he has been found to be, the judges have not found any wrongdoing on his part, and I think that's important to make note of. So, you know, he's not here to express himself, nor would he do that tonight in the same way that I'm doing it, but I felt that a comment needed to be made in his absence to that effect. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Wade. Very well said. All right. Anything more? Okay, we will close the public comment.
Was there any online? I see there's a one on the chat.
Just made a comment.
Is that
Yeah, no, the chat, is that
the
something?
chat has
that-
a one on it, so I didn't know if somebody had put something in there for us to see.
Mr. Rokovitz commented that Mr. Franson's comments were totally false.
Okay,
Well, I'll put it on the record that before I came to city council, I had only been on the little bit of rough side of Corbett, and I wasn't a huge fan, but as I've come here and learned what he does and all his responsibilities and how much he cares about the city, and I've taken the time to learn, I've changed my opinion 100%. And I didn't know him, I didn't know anything about him, I had brief encounters with him before I was on city council, and he does come across rough, he does, but he does a tremendous job, and I know that he's aware of that and he works on that. So, my opinion of him has changed dramatically. He cares about this city, and we would be lost without him, we'd be in big trouble. And I have that most respect for him.
thank you. Okay, then now we will close the public comment portion. And item 16, approval of the April 2022 financials and May 2022 financials.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Pratt,
I'll second it.
seconded by Councilmember Lunt. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 18, decision, proposed development agreement for Summit Creek.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Okay, a motion to approve the development agreement by Councilmember Pratt,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councilmember Kinnison. And that,
Before we vote, I want to thank David and Wayne for hours and hours of work on that. I mean, this is how they spent Christmas. I remember it was a really a big demand on you guys, and I just appreciate their knowledge and the time they spent on that.
yeah, no, I think that needs to be said. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Is this a roll call vote? Okay, roll call vote, Councilmember Malkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Hilliard,
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt,
Yes.
Councilmember Kinnison,
Yes.
Councilmember Lund.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Ready to go?
Yeah,
Woo-hoo.
yeah.
Finally, is it Christmas?
Are you ready for a party, Steve?
Merry Christmas in July.
I just want to make sure that Ben's not doing the happy dance in the back.
Well, we can turn the camera on.
Yeah, if you're going to, you should do it
He's
on,
standing on the chair, yeah.
He still has his clothes on.
Temporarily.
That is a blessing to us all, a blessing to us all.
All right, item 19, table. Item 20, request, oh, that is also
Tabled.
tabled, yep. 21, formal indemnification request for Corbett Stevens
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Okay, motion by
I'll second
Councilmember
that.
Malkovich, seconded by Councilmember Hilliard. That's just a standard vote, right, Kay? I'm still learning. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Resolution approving the April 2022 check disbursements and the May 2022 check disbursements. So,
I'll move to approve both of those.
I'll second it.
all right, motion by Councilmember Pratt, seconded by Councilmember Lunt. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 24, ordinance creating a fee schedule for misdemeanor violations of the City of Woodland Hills City Code.
I'll make a motion.
I'll
Okay,
second.
motion by Councilmember Hilliard, seconded by Councilmember Malkovich. Let's see, okay, that's a roll call vote. Councilmember Malkovich,
Yes.
Councilmember Hilliard,
Yes.
Councilmember Pratt,
Yes.
Councilmember Kinnison,
Yes.
Councilmember Lunt.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Be nice to have some teeth.
Yeah. Item 25, resolution amending the city fee schedule, increasing the monthly sewer fee.
That's crap.
No, I'm making a
I'll
motion.
take the bullet. I'll make the motion.
Okay.
We really don't have a
Councilmember
choice
Hilliard
on that.
Nope.
I'm not second.
Come on. Second the
Nobody
crap.
wants to do it. What if we don't do it, Mayor? Will the cost stay down?
It doesn't matter. They'll just force it down our throat either way.
We still
Come on,
have to
girl.
pay it, it
We
just
still
comes
have
out
to
of the
pay it.
budget.
Yep.
It will come out of the city
I
budget rather
will,
than.
I will second the motion then, so. it
Okay,
doesn't come out
thank
of the
you.
city budget.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Pratt seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Me.
You're opposed? Okay, well, motion carried, nevertheless.
I just want to go on record. That was like the least enthusiastic yay that I have ever heard out of this group. So
Couldn't make it sound any worse.
Thankfully, it should be temporary. We hope. We'll
Okay.
push as fast as we can to make it as temporary as possible.
Item 26, approval of the sheriff contract.
I move that we approve that contract.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Kinnison,
I'll second.
seconded by Councilmember Malkovich. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, it probably would be worthwhile, I know it's been a long meeting, just a brief overview.
I was gonna request, just
So,
for, I have to take comments.
and let me just read through this. So an open meeting can be closed for the following purposes: discussing an individual's character, professional competence, or physical or mental health; strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining; strategy sessions to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation; discussions regarding security personnel, devices, or systems; investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct. So we will now enter closed session. If
You have to
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I'll
Councilmember
second it.
Lunt's motion, Councilmember Hilliard seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you,
Any
Al.
opposed?
Fine.
Motion carried. Closed session begins.
hey, just before you go, I just
Yes,
want to
yes.
really just thank everybody for their work, especially Dave and Wayne. So it's been a long process, but we appreciate it.
Thanks to you.
Thanks, Steve.
I sent Jim with a text saying that. it should
I'll
be-
motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Councilmember Malkovich,
I'll second that.
seconded by Councilmember Hilliard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
He was like.
Thank you.